Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
Harry froze. His mind went blank as many memories of those words flew through his head, spoken at the same inflection with the same amount of emotion. He saw her face as she said it and felt the smile he sent her. His best friend long since gone from the world he had abandoned against his will. Harry, the voice asked again. Are you okay? Are you okay, Harry? Tony asked. Aye, Harry stammered. Finally his brain caught up with him and his eyes widened. He turned around to see the translucent form of his best friend. Hermione was all he got out before he fell over on his ass with his mouth agape. When he was able to speak again, his first words were, "I'm so sorry," and then he refused to look at her. "I'll send you back right now. Harry James Potter, if you send me back without speaking to me, I'm telling your parents that you wouldn't even acknowledge my existence," she yelled angrily. "Harry, could you please introduce me to your friend?" Jarvis spoke up. "What friend?" Tony asked, looking around. "Can someone please tell me what is happening? Do you not see the lady standing in front of Harry?" Jarvis asked. "No, there's nobody there," Tony insisted. "Could you show him what you're seeing, Jarvis?" Harry asked, still unable to look up. "Certainly," Jarvis said as he connected his wireless systems to the network and accessed the screen on the wall. He had a module for data communication built in, but he would only later realize how bored humans could become, and then he'd be grateful for it. In the meanwhile, he had the screen show what he was looking at. "What the hell?" Tony screamed, moving away from the person no more than a couple of feet in front of him. "Who the hell is that?" "Hermione, guys, Hermione," Harry said emotionlessly as he got up. "Hello," Jarvis offered. "Would you be a ghost or apparition? You are slightly translucent." "I am not a ghost," Hermione said indignantly. "I'm a spirit. Harry summoned me from the other side, I think. I apologize for the confusion, but I am new to everything," Jarvis said as he held out his hand politely. "My name is Jarvis. It is a pleasure to meet the person that I can partially thank for my existence." Hermione smiled sadly at him but refused his hand. "I'm a spirit, so no physical contact, sorry." "What is she saying?" Tony asked. "Come on, tap me in," he said as he picked up an earpiece and popped it in. "Frequency is you have been connected," Jarvis said. "I did set that frequency myself, remember?" "Echo much?" Tony asked. "Sorry sir, echo cancellation is now active." Jarvis said. "That's better, thanks," Tony said as he moved so that he could look through where the spirit was at the screen. "Hi, I'm Tony, Harry's new best friend." Then he turned to Jarvis and, "Stop calling me sir, you're a person now. You can be who you want to be, just because you're used to it doesn't mean you have to be my helper anymore." "I'm sorry, Tony," Jarvis said hesitantly. "That will take some getting used to." Jarvis and Tony then turned to Harry. "Okay Harry, time to explain. What is happening? Are you manifesting something, and why can only Jarvis see it?" Harry stayed quiet and refused to look away from the ground. He was so afraid of making eye contact and seeing the hatred deep in her gaze that he couldn't bring himself to look. Hermione sighed and rolled her eyes. "He's still an idiot then." She asked bluntly. "Miss, I'm not certain I know what you are referring to," Jarvis said. As Jarvis finished what he was saying, there was a pop and Natasha appeared, having been drawn to Harry when she felt his panic and feelings of guilt. She looked around while in a combat stance, weapon drawn. "I got here as soon as I could. What's going on and who's the ghost girl?" she asked as she noticed the translucent girl. "You can see her?" Tony asked. "Why can't I see her?" "You are probably a muggle, while she's obviously a witch," Hermione said matter-of-factly. "I wouldn't go calling her names. She could kick your ass, probably, even if you are intangible." Tony said. "The word you're looking for is ethereal." Hermione said. "Someone tell me what's going on," Natasha demanded as she moved next to Harry and tried to catch his eyes. She could see he was in pain and assumed it had something to do with the ghost. "How do I get rid of her? If she's hurting you, you have to tell me what to do," she asked urgently. "You can't get rid of me. Harry summoned me," Hermione said. "I still don't know why, but I can only assume he's still blaming himself for my death." She looked at the redhead. "Who are you?" "Natasha Romanoff. I'm Harry's fiancée." She introduced herself with a scowl. "Why do you think he summoned you?" "Because he was the only magical in the room that could, and he's obviously the master of." She started. "Stop," Harry suddenly spoke up. "Please don't tell them. They don't need to know." "Know what? That you're a necromancer," Tony exclaimed. "Why would I mind? It's fucking awesome. You can do whatever you like as long as you bring me back when I die from alcohol poisoning." He joked. Harry got a faint smile for a flicker of a moment. "That wouldn't do, but seriously, if I do die, give me a couple of hours to go find Stain and kick his ass personally. There's some stuff we never got sorted out, and I'd really like to break his neck a couple of times." Tony looked at Hermione. "Can ghosts kick each other's asses?" Hermione noticed Harry's mood being dragged back a bit. This man really did know Harry. "Sure, Sirius and James are always fighting." Apparently Sirius always thought he could hook up with Lily in the afterlife. The vows were till death do us part after all. Harry looked up incredulously. You're lying, he accused, not able to control the smile at the thought of Padfoot and Prongs, reunited at last. Only for Padfoot to start sniffing around his mum. Why, yes I am, but you are finally acknowledging my existence. Hermione smirked at him. Jarvis, who had been quiet till now, decided to defend his friend. Harry is usually much better at that. He accepted me as a person when my mind was still a computer system. Wait, what? Hermione asked before shaking her head in exasperation. Is everyone in the future around the bend, or did Harry do something stupid again? I'm more inclined to believe the latter. Myself, I didn't do something stupid, Harry defended. I just taught an artificial intelligence how to use runes and it became a real person. So it makes about as much sense as most of what happened every year during school. Hermione asked. It was actually done by design and with prior knowledge that it might occur. Jarvis said, and I am very happy with the result, he said, indicating his body. But how? Hermione asked. Hermione Granger. A skeptic of what's possible with technology, Harry scoffed. He'd not made eye contact yet, but at least the banter was helping him cope. The fact that Natasha had an arm around him helped. Runes are not technology, Hermione exclaimed. She turned to Jarvis. Did Harry warn you of the dangers at least? Are you using them safely? Wait, why am I asking this? She interrupted herself as she turned back to Harry. If he's a computer, he doesn't have the required capabilities to charge runes magically. For that matter. How can he see me? What's going on, Harry? It's a long story, but let's get a couple of things straight. Tony interrupted. First off, you're a spirit from what comes after death, and Harry can summon the spirits of the dead. Jarvis is a living computer we created using a lot of our own work into magical studies, and yes, that includes me, a muggle, and your own ideas about a magical calculator. He said. Did I miss anything? Apparently it's strange that I can see spirits, Jarvis said politely. And she'd like to know how we charge our rune sets. Oh yes, let's not forget that, Tony said, somehow feeling better. So let's tackle the first question. Why did Harry summon you? Hermione seemed to be struggling to keep it all in her head, but after a moment and what seemed like 20 thoughts flashing over her face, she answered, if what you're saying is correct, then he may have accidentally summoned me when you had a success with the magical logic unit I was trying to build. There was silence for a moment until Natasha broke it. So Harry is being stupid by blaming himself for your death. The way he tells it, your death was directly his fault due to negligence. Is that what you've been telling people, Harry? Hermione fumed. She balled her hands into fists and walked up to his face. If I could punch you, I'd be giving you the same as I gave Malfoy back in third year. How dare you sully your own name by making my death sound like your fault? It was my fault, okay? It was all my fault, Harry exclaimed. Then he continued in a whisper, you're all dead and I'm the one that didn't stop Riddle in time. Hermione turned to Natasha. Could you give him a good hard punch for me? Sure, Natasha said as she used her unused arm to deliver a hard punch to his solar plexus. He was completely unprepared for it and was winded enough to fall to his knees and struggle to breathe. I've been wanting an excuse to do that for a while now. He can be unbearable when he starts blaming himself for everything. Then she turned to Harry. I'm sorry, honey, but you needed that. Thanks, Harry wheezed sarcastically as he toppled forward, still clutching his stomach. Hermione was scandalized. I was joking. She thought she saw his feet leave the ground with that hit. You really shouldn't do that with her. That was a mild love tap for Natasha, Tony said with a smile. Then he turned to Natasha. Seriously, how are you seeing her? Probably the magic engagement ring, Natasha said, lifting up her ring and looking at it thoughtfully. Sure, she could apparate to Harry, but he explained it as him concentrating for her and pulling the ring to him when she willed it. She had hoped to gain some sort of magical ability, but it seemed like she only got enough of a magical boost to activate magical items without being bonded to them, which was good but not as awesome as actually wielding magic would have been. Now it seemed she could see things that normal people couldn't. Maybe she just needed to give it time. I can probably see Miss Granger because my nerve endings are rune-based, magical sight and hearing. Jarvis spoke up. That does make sense, I suppose, Tony groused. Maybe we can work on a rune-inlaid pair of sunglasses or something. I bet I can figure out X-ray vision too. Harry can already do X-ray vision, Hermione said thoughtfully, taking everything in. He says it's not what it's cracked up to be. He told me that once, but I'm talking about the seeing through clothes type, Tony said with a grin. Not the kind that sees the skeleton. And what would you use those for? Came a voice from the door. Pepper had just arrived. Jarvis, why didn't you warn me? Tony said at the ceiling out of habit. Because I'm no longer connected to the security system, Jarvis said. He understood the confusion though. 2.0, Miss Pepper asked that I not report her approach. 2.0 said, I like this, Pepper said. Jarvis was still programmed to only really follow Tony's commands. 2.0 is listening to and following my requests as well. Tony asked me to do that, Jarvis said quickly. And Jarvis, is that really you? Pepper asked. It is, Miss Potts, Jarvis said with a smile as she walked up to him to hug him. He returned the gesture. It's a little tight, Jarvis, Pepper complained. Jarvis let go slightly. That's better. Then she let go and took a step back. You're looking good. Darcy is going to be excited to go on that date. What date? Tony asked suddenly. He's not even a day old. She's going to use him like a sex toy. Tony turned to Jarvis. You are forbidden from seeing that girl. She's bad news. Jarvis smirked slightly. I think I understand a bit about human behavior I did not before, he said. The moment you said it was forbidden, I had the sudden desire to do the opposite of that. Then Jarvis got a thoughtful look. I wonder if Darcy is still single. Tony looked wounded. This was about the time that Harry finally got back on his feet. Welcome back, Natasha said. Thanks, Harry replied, still holding his tender stomach. Good hit, I didn't see it coming. If you spent less time on the moon and more time training with me, you would have. Natasha said with a smile. Excuse me, Hermione asked politely. Could you clarify a few things for me? Of course, Miss Granger. Jarvis said. Who is that? Hermione pointed at Pepper. What rune-based nerves? What's this about a magical engagement ring? Why and how is Harry spending time on the moon, and where the hell are we? She got out all in one breath. One moment please, Tony asked while he went to fetch an earpiece for Pepper. When he got back he said, Pepper was feeling left out of the conversation. He put the headset in Pepper's ear and said, Pepper, I'd like you to meet Hermione Granger, Harry's friend from his old world. Apparently he accidentally summoned her spirit from the afterlife, which he can do for reasons he doesn't want to discuss. Hermione, may I call you Hermione? Either way, this is Pepper Potts, the CEO who runs my company, and my future fiancé. Future fiancé? Harry asked. This was the first he was hearing about this. Didn't you know? I thought you and Natasha discussed everything, Tony said with a half smile. Pepper's been dropping hints for months now. I recently noticed her making arrangements to have me in the general vicinity of jewelry stores so that I could come to the idea myself, he said. Then he looked at Natasha. Your fiancé probably gave her the idea. I did not, Natasha denied. I told her to propose to you. I told her to buy you a diamond ring that you'd have to wear if you didn't move quickly enough. Harry could probably do the sex change magic on both of you for the event. Tony paled, then he looked at Pepper. Want to get married? As he said it, he pulled a box from his pocket and went down on one knee. Stop, Pepper said before he could open the box. If you know I'm planning it, don't go ruining my plans. Tony got up and smirked. At least you can arrange a photographer or something, he said lamely. Why? Harry can get us all the photos we want with the pensive tablet, from every conceivable angle and with better quality, she scoffed. Then she smiled, and just as suddenly she frowned. Damn it, Tony, now I'm going to be all excited until next week. How am I supposed to concentrate on work? Simple, say yes now, Tony offered. Pepper just glared at him and refused to speak. Hermione was holding her head. Pensive tablet. You've got a lot of questions, I'm sure, and with time we'll fill you in, Tony said easily. We can't, Harry said. Keeping her here too long will hurt her. He turned to her. How are you doing? Oh, stuff it, Harry. You and I both know the story didn't say how long or why the spirit started despairing. Until I've got all my answers, you're not sending me back, Hermione said vehemently. Unless you've summoned other spirits that told you otherwise. Well, not really, Harry admitted. But why would you want to stay? Weren't you happy on the other side? Hermione was suddenly very quiet. Natasha's fist clenched, and Harry was just able to block it in time. I thought she was your friend. Why would you not want to spend time with her? She asked. Oh, get over yourself, Harry, Tony said. She obviously doesn't blame you, and even if the entirety of the rest of the other side does blame you, she's still your friend. Would you reject me like this? He asked. Something about what Harry was doing was offending Tony quite personally. Of course not, Harry argued. I know what you're saying. I've been to the bloody grief counselor, and I know I'm suffering from survivor's guilt, but that doesn't mean I can just stop the guilt. I can't help but be afraid that when I look my friend in the eyes, that I will see the hatred I have for myself. Harry looked at Tony. You've seen backup plan, right? I saved chickens, Tony. Chickens? Why couldn't I save one person, just one? But you saved the most important person, Harry, Natasha told him. You told me yourself if you hadn't survived, you couldn't try to save your whole world later. She put her hands on the sides of his head and forced his face up to meet her eyes. Hermione is right. You're being stupid by holding on to this guilt for no reason. Once you figure out how, you'll save them all, and then you'll probably just feel guilty all over again for not being able to say goodbye. Also, Hermione spoke up, you're not the only survivor. What? Harry said, suddenly meeting her gaze without fear, but he was looking for a lie. He found none. Luna is still alive, Hermione said with a sad smile. Her father told me in the next place she went to go visit family in the fairy realm. Did you know she's part fae? No, I didn't, Harry said. Then he started to fall over. Natasha caught him. He was able to get his balance but suddenly felt weak. Jarvis brought over a chair and he sat in it. "Luna's alive," he whispered. Somehow the fact that one of his friends lived was enough to give him hope, but he suddenly felt a weight lift off his shoulders, something he had not known he was carrying. She wasn't the only one. Hermione continued. "Some of the old families had magics, dark magics, which they used to send themselves to other worlds. I'm assuming that's what happened to you." Harry nodded dumbly. Then he looked up at her and smiled for the first time in a while. "It's damn good to see you, Hermione," he said with genuine joy. "You too, you idiot." Hermione joked easily but with a smile he had missed more than he knew. Then she looked up. "Okay, so if Harry's told you anything about me, he's probably mentioned that I hate not knowing things, so who's going to fill me in while Harry gets his fiancée to cast a cheering charm on him?" "Wish I could," Natasha mumbled. "Natasha is not a witch, there is no wizarding world here," Harry said sadly. "But she can see me and she apparated here, I saw it," Hermione objected. "Harry gave me access to his magic." Natasha said, "That's not possible, magic isn't something you can share between people, especially non-magical people." Hermione objected. "What world are we in right now, Hermione?" Harry asked. "I don't know, how could I?" Hermione rebuffed. Harry just lifted an eyebrow. "Oh right, I don't know what's possible here that wasn't before," she said thoughtfully, "but then how did you do it?" "Harry's dad taught him some new tricks," Tony said with a wicked smile. Hermione was about to object but then held her tongue and instead asked, "His dad?" She said it calmly and with visible effort to control her outburst. "He was adopted," Natasha said. Hermione took a breath of relief and then Natasha continued, "By the king of the Norse gods, Odin." Hermione froze, but this was only after he started making intergalactic portkeys. "But after he summoned Fawkes to this reality from yours," Tony put in. "Which happened directly after he helped us save the world from an alien invasion that was being led by one of the people that now calls him brother," Natasha continued. "And then there was the Mandarin," Natasha said, "but he was a fake." Tony said, "The real bad guy was caught by Harry and we were able to contain him. And then everything he did on the island with the magical creatures, not to mention S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha said, "and potions and runes and intent-based magic." "Rather than magic with intent," Harry said. "It's been a busy couple of years." "How long have you been on this world?" Hermione asked incredulously, looking around and looking at the technology she didn't recognize. What she was hearing sounded like a decade's worth of incidents, but knowing Harry, it could have all happened in the last couple of weeks. "Just a little over 4 years, Harry said. Hermione looked at him with a mock smile. "You really just can't stay out of trouble, can you?" "Well, he is engaged to the world's most deadly assassin." Tony smirked. This time Hermione couldn't take it. She fell onto a chair only to fall through it. "Damn it, Harry," Hermione said. "Tell your friends to stop that. They are only telling the truth." Harry said, "Frankly, I'm not even sure how Tony is keeping his composure. He's been singing your praises for weeks." "As he went over your research?" "He's been finishing my research," Hermione asked. "I thought you said you'd do it, you promised me." "No offense, Hermione, but while Harry is a quick study, he would need decades to do what Jarvis and I did," Tony said. "Once we finish a project, we take him through it, and usually he only has a vague idea of how we did what we did and what it means. The only reason they do that is because I asked them to. I apply some of the theory to my enchantments. I've been getting quite good at enchanting, monitoring enchantments that tell us when a conjuration is about to disappear," Harry said proudly. "The runes are faster to put on the item though," Tony argued. "Just you wait, one day I'll be faster at enchanting than you can have your lasers carve runes." Harry said, "Good luck with that." Tony scoffed. "With the new HG CPU, the speed of machines and their processing will only keep increasing exponentially." "Laser-carved runes, HG CPU?" Hermione asked. "Heard that, did you?" Tony replied. Tony started explaining how they adapted her ideas into reality and where they were currently in the application. Hermione seemed to be following along with a little effort and a bit of help on the technical side. Apparently Tony was still smarter than her, but with her specialized learning, she was capable of achieving quite a lot in theory that many others would not have a hope to even understand. It was a couple of hours later, when Hermione walked up to Harry, who had long since gone cross-eyed. He had had to send Natasha back to her office and Pepper had returned to her own. The amount of theory and knowledge floating around the room and being discussed casually had gone over his head in under 10 minutes. Since then he had just listened to them as they discussed the projects and applications of some of Tony's own projects. He'd add some things here and there when they touched on something he knew or they had explained to him. Jarvis was right there with them and the three of them were happily discussing the things they had achieved since they finished their self-imposed masteries. "Harry?" she asked. "Yes," Harry said as he looked up at her from where he had set to work on trying to get some clear glass enchanted to see the magical. He'd yet to have any success. But that was because Harry could already see the magical, and he was struggling with planning the application. "I think I know what the story meant now," Hermione said with a sad smile. I'm getting tired, I don't think I'd be able to rest here. Harry was suddenly concerned. Will I ever be able to see you again? You better, Hermione said. I'm just going back to rest. Maybe I can pass a message on to the people there. Try calling me again in a week just to be sure, okay? Okay, and you're sure you can't tell me what I'm missing out on? Harry asked. Sorry, but no, even if I could, what would be the point? Hermione said sadly. He'd never die if he was who she thought he was. Fair enough. Harry said he had similar thoughts. Keep up the good work you're doing here. Hermione encouraged him. I'm going to rub so much of this in their faces, and let's not forget telling the Marauders and the twins about your victory over the god of trickery in a prank war. They will go nuts. Hey, don't go spoiling Harry's fun, Tony said. What if he decides to summon them at some point? He'd probably love to tell them himself. You're a good friend, Tony. Hermione said. I'm still not certain you're a better friend than I was, but I'm glad he has someone. I'm the best friend a person could ask for, Tony objected. Is that why you spend so much time drinking with him? Can't you enjoy yourselves without alcohol? Hermione countered. Blasphemy, both Harry and Tony said at the same time. Then they laughed and high-fived. You're as bad as the twins, she said. Fine, maybe you are a good friend, just get him to enjoy some time off as well. I know him, he'll relax, but not when there's something to do, and it seems like there's always something to do. Especially with him owning an organization that patrols and protects the entire bloody planet. And a few others as well if his plans work out. Tony said easily. Tell me about that next time. Hermione said, looking uncomfortable. I think it's time. I understand. Harry said sadly. Send my love to the Marauders and all the redheads. Goodbye, Harry. Hermione said with a nod. Goodbye, Harry said. Then he willed her back to where she came from and she was gone. It was an emotionally exhausted Harry that retired to Tony's bar with him. Jarvis had picked up the phone to call Pepper and tell her that they were done in the lab when she walked in the door. I called Miss Potts and Romanoff when you were done in the lab, sir. 2.0 informed Jarvis. Call me Jarvis, Jarvis said with a small pout, and I know you know I was looking forward to making my first phone call. I am only as you programmed me, sir, 2.0 said with a hint of humor in his voice. He was programmed to anticipate needs after all. Now I understand why you were exasperated with me so often, Jarvis said to Tony as he sat down, getting the feeling for the position. Sitting feels good after standing for so long. Do you want a butter beer? Tony asked, remembering Jarvis's statement about alcohol a while back. Actually, I'd like to try eating something. Jarvis said, what do you want? Harry asked, wondering what his first meal would be. Everything, Jarvis said. You said something about conjured food disappearing, right? Harry smirked and then thought about it. Tony, what do you think? Cheeseburgers, Tony said instantly. If he's going to have anything, it's got to be an American cheeseburger. As expected, Jarvis said, I have no preference as I have nothing to base it on, so that will work for me, but if I had a preference, the egg-topped bacon cheeseburger with fries that he prepared for himself. Peter Quill and Nebula did look appetizing. Harry shrugged and closed his eyes, imagining all the steps he'd normally go through to create the meal, with the spices and sauces added at their appropriate times. When he was sure he had all the flavors correct and sorted out in his head, he waved a hand and produced 5 miniature versions of the burgers in a plate. I thought making it bite-sized would be preferable, considering burgers can be messy the more you put on them. Much appreciated, Jarvis said as he slid the plate in front of himself. Just let me check that it tastes right, Tony said as he reached out to take one of the miniature burgers. Jarvis swatted his hand away, much to Tony's incredulity. You would not tolerate someone eating off your plate. I am merely following your example, Jarvis said defensively. Then he reached out and picked one of the small burgers up. He lifted it to his nose and sniffed it. It does smell interesting. Considering I don't have any experience with such things, I'm assuming it smells good. Then he opened his mouth and bit through half of the burger before proceeding to chew. It was an awkward first experience, and he had to consciously think where his tongue was as he manipulated the food around his mouth while he chewed, something children learn to do without thinking as they grew up. And, Tony asked. Jarvis finished the first bite and swallowed. He still had to manually activate and use the muscles involved with swallowing, but he was writing the actions directly into his subconscious so that he wouldn't have to think about it next time. When he was done with that, he stuck the rest of the burger into his mouth and chewed again, this time being able to focus on the flavor rather than not biting his own tongue off. When he swallowed that bit, he focused on the flavor left in his mouth and the feel of the bits that were left. The whole experience was new to him, but he felt he could get used to it. While he wasn't used to all the flavors and couldn't identify or classify any of them, he felt the entire experience was slightly overwhelming. So many new sensations just in 2 bites. I think, Jarvis started, that I rather enjoyed that. Try a fry, Tony said as Harry presented him with his own plate before he stole any of Jarvis's first meal. Jarvis did just that, and before he could ask, Harry produced a couple of different sauces for him to try when he was ready. Jarvis tried a fry dry first, to get the base flavor identified so that he could compare between the different condiments. When he was done savoring it, he took another fry and looked between the different sauces. He decided to try ketchup first and dipped his fry in and then tasted that. "This is really good," Tony said as he dug into his own plate. "The mini burgers are complete burgers too. It's not like the sliders where they have to cut some things out or too thin. This tastes amazing." "Why don't you always do this?" "I guess it's a habit. I used to need the sustenance while I was living in backup plan. There was no such thing as eating for fun. It was all about survival. I couldn't waste the energy if I wasn't getting anything out of it," Harry explained. Jarvis swallowed his current fry before adding, "I may have made a mistake going with Harry's food first then. If this is really the best I can have, won't other food just disappoint me now?" Tony shook his head. "Harry's food is sometimes near gourmet level, but you won't always want that. Sometimes you just want to fill up on chips and a Coke. It's not sophisticated, but so satisfying." Jarvis considered this before nodding. "I think I see what you mean, but I think it will be good to remember my first meal was something good that was magically created just for me." Jarvis smiled at Harry before he went back to his meal, getting into the movements and routine rather quickly. He had put quite a bit of thought into his first food experiences, and while he did have a list of things he'd like to try, he didn't have any preferences, though he expected that to change once he figured out what flavors he liked more than others. Natasha turned up with Pepper before Jarvis could finish his meal, and they all started chatting about Hermione's visit, while asking Jarvis of his first experiences. Even Tony was surprised at the things he took for granted after that conversation. One doesn't always think of how all your senses help you to interact with the world and perceive it. You see yourself touch an object and feel it at the same time, but you tend to think of the experience as one experience, not 3 or 4, depending on how warm, hard, and heavy the item is. It was quite humbling to think of everything people tend to take for granted. By the end of the evening, Jarvis decided it was time to go to bed, and everyone bid him good night. Tony then showed him to his room, where he would have everything he'd need. Jarvis was looking forward to having his own space, but was worried about what would happen once he got used to all the new sensations. He was worried that things might become too quiet, but then he could just do what Tony did, switch on some music and start working on something. When Tony returned, it was to find his friends sitting at his bar and having a couple of shots. "Hey, what about me?" "We're taking conjured shots," Harry said with a smile. "It doesn't count." "Really? Okay then, if it doesn't count, I want 5. Tony said. "Sure," Harry said as he conjured 5 shots for Tony. Tony looked at the different colored shots. "What is this?" "I don't know," Harry said. "I'm having my magic change the color and flavor randomly." "You remember Harry telling us about Bertie Blatt's every flavor beans?" Pepper asked. "Bots, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans," Harry corrected. "Yeah, that." Pepper allowed. "Well, this is Harry Potter's every flavor shots. Have fun with your 5 shots, Natasha said with a wicked smile. Tony, obviously not knowing what he was getting himself into, took a shot and downed it in one. "Nice caramel vodka. How is that fair?" Natasha asked. "My first one tasted like aspirin." "Aspirin?" Tony asked with his next shot in his hand. "Every flavor, Tony," Harry said. "You could be holding Polyjuice flavor in your hand." Tony remembered Harry's horror stories. "I don't think I like this game anymore," he whined. "Too bad," Harry said. "You came up to us and demanded to take part without knowing the risks." Tony looked mutinous as he looked at the dark brown shot in his hand. "Suddenly this doesn't look like chocolate." He squared his shoulders and downed the shot. His eyes shot open, but it turns out it was Turkish Delight. "Awesome. Keep laughing. That just raises the chances for the next one to hurt," Natasha said. She was worried that Tony got all the good ones. She loved Turkish Delight. Tony looked at the other 3 shots. One was blue, one was a suspicious yellow, and the other was clear. "You're just jealous that Harry's magic loves me." To emphasize the statement, he lifted the blue shot and downed it, only to start coughing violently. After a moment he stopped and they could see he'd lost some color. "Gas," he said with a grimace. "As in petrol?" Harry asked. "Yes, as in petrol." Tony said. "This can't hurt me, right? It's conjured and definitely alcohol, so no, not unless you drowned in it." Harry said. "If it makes you feel any better, mine tasted like drain cleaner." "Why would your magic do that?" Tony asked. "Maybe it thinks the idea is funny," Harry offered with a shrug. "Or maybe it thinks Natasha will find it funny." He considered aloud. "It's right. Watching Tony come up short when it comes to drinking is amazingly funny." Natasha confirmed with a smile. "What was yours?" Tony asked Pepper. "Paper," Pepper said, "and toffee. My second one was water." Natasha shrugged. "Paper?" Tony asked, trying to imagine a liquid that tasted like paper. He shook his head and poured himself a fire whiskey just in case he needed a chaser. Then he picked up the clear liquid and poured it down his throat. I got water too. I suppose it was statistically possible, Harry said. Tony didn't want to have the suspense build again and down the next one immediately. He regretted it almost instantly. Ah, he yelled, chili pepper. Harry conjured a glass of milk for his poor friend who had tried to drown the flavor with his drink. Drink this, he said as he conjured some nachos with cheese. Then eat this. I don't know why cheesy nachos work, but they do. Tony had finished downing the milk and quickly started eating the nachos. Almost instantly his mouth started feeling better. Thanks, he said between bites. Next time you'll wait to hear the rules of the game first, won't you? Natasha said, having finally stopped laughing at Tony's expense. What made you decide to play this moronic game anyway? Tony asked. We were discussing using something like that to help Jarvis experience flavors, but quickly discovered the problem with it. Harry said. Problem? Tony asked. It sounded like a good idea to him. How would I know what he tasted? Harry asked. And why would he need to know what print toner tasted like, or fridge magnets? Those were very specific examples. Have you tasted those things? Tony asked. In my second last pack of every flavor beans, yes. Harry said. Their magic let you know what you were tasting in case you didn't recognize it, but I have no idea how they did that, nor do I care enough to take the time to figure it out. Your magic seems to do a good enough job either way. Tony said. Yeah, well, you know the flavor, he doesn't. His mouth would just burn without him understanding what it meant. Harry said. Tony just nodded in understanding. At this point he was just enjoying the nachos. He no longer needed them. So Hermione's lovely. Pepper said. Any chance you can tell us how you did that? I'd rather not discuss it, Harry said, conjuring his own plate of nachos to share with Natasha. Natasha obviously didn't feel the same. Tell them, Harry, or I will. They are your friends and will worry otherwise. Harry just sat there and kept eating. He did understand, but that didn't mean he liked discussing it. He did wave his hand to make no sound leave their immediate vicinity. 2.0 was still new. Better not tempt fate. Natasha took the gesture as explicit permission, so she began. When Harry was a kid, he challenged Death to a duel and Death actually showed up. Harry then kicked him in the balls and ran away. Death chased him for a bit, but Harry got away. Death respected him so much for getting away that he gave Harry special death-related powers. Natasha said with a straight face. What? Tony asked incredulously. Yeah, none of that was true. Harry said. There's a long story behind it, but I do have death-related powers. It all stems back to something my great-great-great-grandfather did with his brothers. They supposedly did defeat Death. But Death didn't like it, so he tricked them into getting themselves killed with gifts he gave them. Those gifts fused with me shortly before I defeated Voldemort. Now I can't die, we think. I can summon spirits, use true invisibility, and my magic no longer needs a focus. Harry said. Look, I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I usually don't go around telling people about this. Only 4 people on Earth knows, and all of them are in this room right now. Tony nodded in understanding. And on Asgard, Odin, Frigga, and Thor, Harry said. I don't think they told Loki, probably Heimdall too. Harry looked thoughtful but then looked up at the ceiling. When you tell my family about this, please mention it was an accident. You saw how she was. I didn't do anything dark or hurtful. A moment later Harry's mirror vibrated. Hi Heimdall, he said when he saw Heimdall's face. Good evening, my prince, Heimdall said respectfully. Odin already knows. I shared my sight with him when he was concerned. He saw how things went and was relieved that you had not done anything dark. Thanks, Harry said softly. Be at peace, Harry. The All-Father did not doubt your intent, and he believes you will respect the dead who do not wish or deserve to speak to you. As long as you do not try to keep them or bring them back fully, you have his blessing to continue as you have. Heimdall assured him. Good evening, my prince. Then he closed the connection. Okay, so you've got the all-seeing eye on speed dial, Tony said with some sarcasm, and he can just share his sight with your father whenever. That doesn't bother me, not in the slightest. He spent some time just watching us today without our knowledge. Fun. Harry was impressed. Tony seemed to be taking the whole death powers thing in stride. He seemed more perturbed by the fact that Heimdall can pass his sight to others who then spent who knew how long watching them. Heimdall does ignore things that are private, but there are laws when it comes to necromancy. Apparently what I do does not break those rules as long as I follow the guidelines he just mentioned, not that I intend to make a habit out of this. You'd better, Natasha said. I want to see Hermione again. Tony monopolized her today and I want some dirt on you. Who you crushed on, how awkward you were, things like that. Harry, somehow feeling better, decided to get some vengeance for her forcing him to reveal this information so underhandedly. That's okay, you get your dirt, he said. I've got an idea how to get you back when you use it. As he said it, he put a hand on her shoulder and froze her body in place. Then he started running his modified tickling charm down her body. For good measure, he increased its power twice over. Harry, she said with a dangerous glint in her eye after she regained some of her color. We have company, so if you want to save yourself from indecent exposure, you'll keep me frozen until you take me home because I'm going to break you. She threatened through clenched teeth, her body shaking as she fought the restraint the magic was imposing. Harry was both scared and impressed, but he kept his hand there to keep her locked in place. Sure thing, Harry said / asked. Did you just do that tickling charm of yours? Tony asked. Maybe, Harry said non-committally. I may have also locked her body in place. You do realize it doesn't tickle, right? It does way more than that. Pepper offered without making eye contact. We think it's either your divine status or your intent-based magic, but you basically flood the brain with dopamine and spread the sensation all over the body. Tony said, it's like you're a sex drug. What? Harry exclaimed, removing his hand from Natasha, who immediately started struggling again. Oh, don't worry, it's not really a drug, no more than your cheering charm anyway. What it does do is make some things much more enjoyable. Pepper said, still not making eye contact, as well as being a very good distraction and a wonderful way of getting her to focus on what's really important. Tony said, waggling his eyebrows. Me, he finished. Harry was shocked and blurted, I just cast the charm 4 times stronger, he said. Then I suggest you take her home and pray to Harry that she doesn't break your little guy off, Tony joked. When did you start doing that? Harry asked with narrowed eyes. Doing what? The whole pray to Harry thing? Tony asked. Harry nodded and Pepper answered, shortly after you gave Tony the ring. It was only slightly disturbing when she cried out your name while we were in bed. Tony joked and Pepper slapped his arm. Harry knew it was a joke but was disturbed either way. His distraction cost him as Natasha broke the hold and jumped on him, having enough presence of mind to activate her portkey home and dragging Harry with her. They did not make it to the bed, and the entire beach house was a mess the next day. Harry's back and chest was a mess of scratches as he lay in bed 6 hours later, with Natasha passed out next to him, in what Harry reasonably accurately considered to be a sex coma. He resolved not to quadruple the magic on what he now called the pleasure charm. At least, not often, he thought with a smile. As he drifted off, another Harry and Natasha left the house, having turned the hourglass 6 times. Natasha, who had quickly and invisibly gone up to go fetch something from the room, had a guilty look on her face. What? Harry asked once they arrived in his office. I didn't know I scratched you that bad, Natasha said with a wince, having spotted her handiwork for the first time as she looked at the Harry on the bed. You should tell me when I'm hurting you that badly, and ruin your fun. Not on your life. Harry laughed and hugged her. She was not very subtle in her prompting to feel his back, so Harry turned around and lifted the shirt, showing unblemished skin. See, no permanent damage. Did you heal yourself this morning? Natasha asked. When I woke up there was nothing to heal, Harry said easily. How long has that been going on? She asked. I remember when you still had to heal yourself manually. I don't know really, Harry said. It really doesn't matter. It's probably just part of Asgard's blessing. He shrugged and gave her a kiss. What's on your schedule today? Natasha allowed the subject change. Do you remember that guy who yelled out about Hank at the press conference about being a mutant? Harry nodded. Well, Maria has been following what came of that. Apparently the guy lost his job and his family is going through a rough time because of him and how you and Steve publicly declared him as a racist. What? Harry asked. Let it go, Harry. Natasha said. I'm handling it. The fact of the matter is that you spoke out publicly against racism and the message is generally positive, but we'll be arranging a change for the family and hiring the guy so that he doesn't starve on the streets. By this time next week, there won't be one site on the internet with their current names visible, and their social media accounts will be scrubbed and replaced by their new identities, filled with a couple of years of fake data to support their new identities. Did I really uproot an entire family's life just by pointing him out and trying to shame him? Harry asked as he thought of how easily he had seemingly destroyed the man's life. It was not what he had in mind at all. He had hoped the man would rethink his stance or at least be less likely to use such horrible terms in public. Harry just wanted to get back at a bully, a person that was probably used to using such terms and getting away with it, because of the anonymity of being in a crowd, which was why he had asked Jarvis to keep a strict eye out for people like that. You did, Natasha said bluntly. You have to remember you have very strong public backing. The entire world only hears good things about you and you help everyone indiscriminately. Being intolerant if intolerance is not unexpected. You have now made an example and people will know better than to do it again, but you cannot be seen going to the man or his family. It would do more harm than good. That is why Maria approached me to ask how I thought you would handle it. Harry was not happy about it but accepted it. "Could you let me know when they are settled and keep me updated on their status?" he asked. "I need to know that they will recover." Natasha smiled at him sadly but nodded. "You are a kind man, Harry. I'll make sure they get what they need to recover from this, I promise." "Thank you," Harry said as he hugged her again, actually needing the contact for a bit. When Natasha let go, she had a thoughtful look in her eyes. "Could you make a ring for me? Like the one you made Stark?" "I suppose I could," Harry answered. "Why though?" "I need a way to distract you and put your mind where it's supposed to be," Natasha said with a saucy wink. Harry chuckled and shooed her from his office. "Thanks for handling this for me," he said gratefully. "Now get out of here, I've got an interview soon. Maria told me that I had to do this one myself." As he said it, he waved his hand and his semi-formal attire turned into a tailored business suit. Natasha's eyes took him in. "Why don't we ever go to high-end restaurants where I can show you off looking like that?" "Because I didn't know there was a need," Harry said with just a hint of humor. "Also, going to public places is such a hassle. Fury always has to scramble the security forces. He hates the idea of me getting sniped while I'm out having fun. I think he'd actually prefer if I got my head blown off while working with the other Avengers, taking down a terrorist cell." "I think Fury prefers the idea of you not dying at all, actually," Natasha said as she started walking to the door. "Something to do with owing you for the ability to sleep at night." Then she was gone. Harry just chuckled and sat down at his desk to read through some of his mails. Half an hour later, there was beep and Harry apparated to his public office, which was not on the hidden floor. He opened the door and when he saw who was on the other side he smiled. "You're hired." Jarvis just smiled back. "I can't wait to start." And that was all it took. Harry finally had a PA who he knew he could trust. He'd never wanted to hire any of his friends and he didn't want to get someone he didn't know. Jarvis, on the other hand, was a friend and he already knew pretty much everything. He was also highly aware of what Harry did on a regular basis. Tony was not impressed when Jarvis carried a cup of tea in for Harry, while he was working on the enchantment factory he had been struggling with. "Hey, why did you steal my Jarvis?" "Jarvis is his own person now, don't you remember?" Harry asked as he accepted the cup. "Thanks, Jarvis," he said. He even signed his own contract. "No problem, Mr. Potter," Jarvis said with a smile. Then he turned to Tony. "Could I get you something, Tony?" "Why is he Mr. Potter and I'm Tony?" Tony whined. "Only during office hours," Harry put in. Jarvis insisted. "He is the one that pays me. It's considered proper to be respectful to one's employer." Jarvis said. "I can pay more than Harry." Tony said. "Why didn't you ask me? We could carpool." "Tony, you work from home most of the time." Harry said. "It would be a very short commute." Tony nodded along with a hint of humor. "I did not mean to offend you, Tony," Jarvis said. "I was just hoping to experience a bit more than I was able to before. Working from your office would feel like I was just doing the same thing. Here I get to meet many new people in the cafeteria and interact with other PAs in the break room." Tony thought about it for a moment before nodding. "At least with you working in Harry's office, I'll still get to see you all the time." "Actually, Jarvis has his own office," Harry said happily. "I don't have any personal items on my desk yet," Jarvis said. "My research indicates I should at least have one personal item on my desk, so that people can connect with me on a personal level if they are so inclined." "These things come naturally," Harry said. "Just give it time. You could always get a poster of a kitten hanging from a branch," Tony suggested. "Actually, a poster is a good idea, but make it of a place you want to visit. That way when people ask you about it, you can say you are saving for a trip or something like that," Harry suggested. "I don't think I'm allowed to put up pictures of New Atlantis in my office," Jarvis said. "You want to visit the island?" Tony asked. "But you were connected there for so long. I'd think you'd be tired of the place by now." "I was connected there, but I'd like to take the tour, smell the ocean, feel the sand and fly on a hippogriff," Jarvis clarified. "I've only seen a few of the creatures and while I've heard all about them, I'd really like to see them too." Harry smiled. "Okay, I tell you what. You want the human experience, so I'll tell you that if you do a good job, I'll take you there one weekend and we can do the whole thing. Flying carpet around the island, looking in on the creatures and saying hi to Logan. What do you say?" "That sounds wonderful, thank you, Mr. Potter," Jarvis said. "Are you sure you can't just call me Harry when we're not around other people?" Harry whined. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Potter." Jarvis smiled. So did Tony. At least Harry now had to deal with Jarvis's sense of humor. "Tony, are you sure you don't want a cup of coffee?" Lillian from accounting suggested an Italian dark roast that we have in the staff room. "I'm going to make some for myself. It would be very little effort to prepare you a cup as well." "And how would you get it to me?" Tony asked. Jarvis walked to the mirror and stuck a hand through where Harry had placed a permanent portal earlier that morning. Harry had decided it was unnecessary to cast it every time. Harry's entire floor was under Fidelius as well as Tony's lab. "That's new," Tony said as he got up and walked to the mirror. He felt first and then walked through. And useful. He said, "Yes please Jarvis, I'll take that coffee, I'll even wait here for it." As he said it, he went to sit in front of Harry in the comfortable chair. "Maybe I should rethink that portal," Harry muttered as he continued with his experiment. The magic for conjuring was a transfiguration of air. And he was not bad at transfiguration. He had yet to take up Loki's offer to learn animal transformations, but he was always so busy. He kept on putting it off. As for the enchantment factory, the problem wasn't the actual conjuration, it was getting the artifact to realize when it was necessary, and then placing the enchantment on the resulting artifact that would let people know when the conjured artifact would start disappearing, so that the correct amount of the correct kind of magic can be applied to prolong the conjuration. So far the device was able to produce the MSC shells, and they could even store magic, but the temporary nature of the conjuration would shorten the lifespan of what was supposed to be a device that could store magic indefinitely. Tony was watching him and asking questions. Harry had been discussing it with him, as he worked at his latest device for the last week. Now that he was giving it his full attention though, he had an idea. "Why don't you have the conjuration feed off the stored energy? If my math is correct, one of those MSC shells can store roughly 10,000 units of MPE, and the conjuration uses a very small amount to maintain, doesn't it?" Tony and Jarvis had come to the conclusion that they needed a term, and a way to measure the amount of energy the MSC shell stored. Jarvis had asked Harry and had then decided that a stinging hex, as a reasonably low power spell, would be the measuring stick. They had measured its power output and then named that unit 1 Magic Potential Energy Unit, or MPE for short. Harry confirmed, yes, it uses probably 1 MPE an hour to maintain its structure. "So that's perfect then," Tony said. "That means if you can have the MSC shell feed off its own stored energy, it would last more than 400 days. Add to that the fact that we can top them up when they begin to get too low. We've got a free new storage medium with very little upkeep." Harry was listening to the suggestion. The problem with that is that the MSC shells will then disappear when they are emptied, since they then rely on the stored energy for the conjuration to be maintained. He said, "How is that a problem?" Tony asked. "You plug in a shell and use the energy. Once it disappears, you don't need to worry about storing the empty or making space for the empties. Even better, nobody can pick up an empty and find the runes on them. The ones I make use enchantment, not runes," Harry said. "It took a bit of doing and the enchantment factory loses a bit of energy in the enchantment process, but it can make the MSC shells with nothing more than the excess energy the PMMGs generate before the power is stored in it. It does mean we're technically losing quite a bit of the magic over time though." "And what happens to the magic that you lose?" Tony asked, having had a thought. Something was tickling his mind. "It escapes back into the atmosphere," Harry said. "And if the escaped magic happens to be around a rune schema that pulls magic from the atmosphere?" Tony asked with a smile. He'd figured it out. "It gets used performing the function that the rune schema dictates." Harry said, wondering what Tony was getting at. Tony was smiling madly now. "The first law of thermodynamics, baby," he exclaimed. "What's that?" Harry asked. Jarvis walked in with 2 cups of coffee. The first law of thermodynamics, also known as law of conservation of energy, states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can only be transferred or changed from one form to another. He answered Harry's question as he placed Tony's coffee in front of him. "Thank you, Jarvis," Tony said, picking up the coffee and turning to Harry. "All we need is a rune scheme that pulls excess energy from the air and deposits it into the MSC shells. Then, when the conjured MSC shell loses 1 point of MPE, the scheme picks it up and deposits it back into the shell." "Is that something that can be done?" Harry asked. If that was true, they may have just discovered a way to use runes to make a conjuration permanent. "I can work on that for you, Mr. Potter," Jarvis said easily. "I need to earn my paycheck after all." "Damn," Tony swore. "Just realized I don't have Jarvis to brainstorm with anymore." He sulked. "You are always welcome to call Jarvis at the office. Our consultation fees are very reasonable," Harry said with a smile. "Or we can discuss it after hours." Jarvis said, "I do still live with you after all." Tony perked up at that. "Thanks, Jarvis, I think I'd like that. You can have a butterbeer or 2 while I have a stiff one and we can talk about who has the worst boss." "But you don't have a boss," Harry said, "and Pepper doesn't run my house," Tony asked incredulously. "So I'll always win because 2.0 will tell Pepper if you badmouth her," Jarvis said with a smile. "And you've got bad things to say about me?" Harry asked. "Well, you did have me fetch you a cup of tea. I'm a pa, not a secretary," Jarvis said with a straight face. "You offered," Harry complained, then Jarvis chuckled. "That's not fair, you've got the world's best poker face. Your emotions aren't subconsciously broadcast like normal people." He whined when he realized he'd been had. "That's just something I count under my skills then." Jarvis said with a straight face as he turned to walk to the door with his own coffee in hand. "Sorry to leave you, but my boss just handed me this huge project, and I have to get to it or he'll cut my pay." He joked as he left. "He's really enjoying this, isn't he?" Tony asked. "It seems that way," Harry said with a fond smile. Then he stretched out. "Okay, while he starts on that, this project is on hold," he said, pointing at the enchantment factory. "Now I've got some other problems to solve," he said as he got back to it. He still needed to figure out a way to store more energy in the MSC shells or some sort of alternative. He had some ideas he'd like to try for that. 2 months later, and Jarvis's research had paid off, and they could now inscribe a rune scheme on any conjured item and have it cycle the energy almost indefinitely. Almost, because some energy still ended up escaping over time, especially in space. But the loss was so minimal. It could be considered negligible. 1 unit of MPE over the course of a month, instead of the original 700 plus. The lifetime of the conjured MSC shells just went up from just over 400 days to more than 800 years estimated. Harry had finally had a breakthrough with the MSC shells too. It was a cheat, but it worked wonderfully when he wanted to take the time to make one really powerful MSC shell. He created a pocket dimension, wherein he created a room, which he filled to the brim with the discs normally found in the MSC shells, which had the runes on them to store the MPE. He had taken it one step further, and had Jarvis inscribe the runes on small discs which he enlarged first, and then shrunk to their normal size, before adding them to the room. The effect did not increase the capacity of each disc tenfold like Harry had hoped, but it did double the storage capacity. Add to that the fact that the volume of the room could be expanded almost indefinitely, and the new shells were capable of vast more storage capacity. Jarvis had kept track of the amount of discs and had helped Harry set up the interior of the room with the required adamantite wiring so that all the discs could be charged from outside the room. It nearly depleted their stock. When that was done, Harry shrunk down the opening of the pocket dimension to fit inside the normal casing of an MSC shell, and Jarvis added the required runes to monitor the power levels. The result was the first MSC shell that could store exactly 10,000 times the amount of MPE of the original MSC shells. Since this shell wasn't conjured, there was also no loss over time. The total amount of power in that one MSC shell scared Harry at 100 million MPE, which took most of the stored energy from all his magic farms over all the worlds, stored over the last 2 months, as well as all of the previously stored energy Jarvis had collected. There was no chance he was putting that on Midnight, so he kept it in a new workshop of his, which happened to be on Svartalfheim. He did not want to risk something setting all that potential energy off and blowing up the Earth. He had originally decided to start working on his more dangerous experiments on the moon, until Tony had pointed out that he could very easily damage the moon with what he was playing with, so Harry had relocated. He decided to make only one other shell like that, which was now the repository for all the energy farmed from all the worlds. His enchantment factory could then be tapped as necessary, through a rune portal, to conjure and charge new MSC shells, before being inscribed by lasers to sustain the conjuration. This process took place at EPI under the strict supervision of Nick Fury. Director Brand was not happy about that, but agreed that it was a good idea to have someone keep track of who used how much power and where. She'd have just preferred herself being the one in charge of it. Harry had decided to keep the original MSC shell in case of emergency and had Tony help him set up a way for him to access its reserves quickly, should the need ever arise. With that done, Harry's magical potential, which was already more than any magic user on the planet had ever seen, was suddenly even more impressive. Tony had even had the grand idea to set it up so that Harry could deposit magical energy into the shell at the end of the day, seeing as he recharged most of said energy himself during the night. The ring with the connection was always on him for safety. He was worried that he would start looking like a gangster. Now that he wore a ring on both hands, so he kept them invisible. Tony, in the meanwhile, had finished his first magical computers. One was for himself, one for EPI's moonbase, and the other for Midnight. He was still writing the operating system for them, so they were not installed or really in use yet. Harry had ended up using some of his own stores of adamantite to help the project. He had found it hard to locate the dwarves, until Thor informed him that the dwarves didn't live on the planet anymore. They had relocated to a dwarf-built station around the sun of their solar system. It was where they harnessed the sun's energy for their forges. Harry wanted to go to them but didn't want to go empty-handed, as he knew he could make or enchant something to impress the dwarves. He put that on the list of projects as well. One of Tony's other projects might help them with their dwindling supply, though. He was working with Bruce and Hank to try and crack the alchemy side of potions. They had already even produced a small amount of adamantite, but the conversion ration left much to be desired, so they were working on finding out how the magic did what it did. Normally applied magic had a temporary effect, but with the formula they found, it was a permanent change and they needed to understand it, since nobody wanted to mess with atomic bonds and accidentally set off an A-bomb. When Tony wasn't writing an operating system, with some help from Jarvis, or messing with the fundamentals of the atom with Bruce, Hank, and sometimes Gemma Simmons, he was busy planning the creation of beacons, which they planned for Midnight to deposit throughout the solar system. These beacons would detect organic life, movement, and anything out of the ordinary entering the solar system. They would be connected via Erder, through which they would receive data and get their power. Unfortunately, it seemed they were hitting a snag, in that there were not enough resources on the planet to create the amount of beacons they would need to seed just their solar system. So Tony was working on finding ways to monitor bigger areas of space and use less beacons to cover greater distances. This project promised to take many years as the technology they needed didn't exist on Earth, and they needed to create it from scratch. In the meanwhile, Midnight's multiple observation decks, which functioned much like the weapons array Fury had used, were permanently occupied with people watching the skies. The fact that they could magically zoom their sight more than any Earthbound telescope could was just a bonus. Tony was quite insistent that the Stark/PI International Space Station would have just as many if not more observation decks, which would then serve a similar role, while allowing the astronomers free rein and allowing them to do their research at the same time. If anything was spotted, the systems would automatically inform them as well. S.H.I.E.L.D. had started putting select scientists in ancient rune classes, with Jarvis's program teaching every class. When they realized what they were being taught, the waiting list for the class skyrocketed as those attending the class told their colleagues, where their contracts allowed. Harry hoped to have a staff of specialists in the next couple of years, whose combined intelligence outshone even Tony's brilliance. Not to invalidate Tony, but rather so that he and Jarvis didn't have to handle all the work as they had been doing of late. 3 months later, the team had been assembled since their mission was so urgent. They had discovered a possible location of the scepter in a Hydra stronghold. Tony had chastised himself for not acting on the intel he had months earlier, when someone from Sokovia had attempted to hack into his systems. Now he suspected he knew who it was. Baron Strucker was one of the last of Hydra's men which they had never been able to track down. On this mission, the Avengers were playing a diversionary role, while EPI sent in the Ghost Squads to infiltrate. They had received word that there were many layers of security, but the team of 30 had gotten in safely. Then they started tagging the priority enemies in the base so that, when the time came, they could be disabled instantly, with as few as possible fatalities, at least for the non-combatants. Veritasrum solved a lot of problems for S.H.I.E.L.D. and they loved two things above all: intel and kicking Hydra butt. When the information had come in, almost all the agents that heard, who had suffered under Hydra's influence before being rescued by Ghost and his people, had volunteered. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s private military had been itching for something to do, and this seemed to be the perfect testing ground. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s military had loved the ART room, and Harry had had to relent and set up another one specifically for military drills and combat simulations. Those soldiers with magical prosthetics had needed the time and experience to get used to the replacements, but by this point, none of them had any issues and would be able to outperform most special ops military. There was protocol in place for this kind of engagement, so a rune-based stealth ship which was made for only 2 people would drop in and open a portal door for the military who was standing by. Next, they set up a camp by opening 3 magic tents which Harry had enchanted for them. The first being for those in command, the second for the arsenal, and the last being the infirmary, where they would bring any wounded civilians and soldiers that did not need immediate extraction. Speaking of which, a whole other branch of S.H.I.E.L.D. was already on standby to set up a perimeter around the nearby town. Their job was to ensure the safety of the innocents. Hydra was not known for their restraint after all. Once the bullets started flying, S.H.I.E.L.D. was to escort the civilians to safety, or protect them with what equipment they had. Thus the mobile bunker ship, or flying forts as the soldiers had started calling them, rune-based ships that were made with 2 purposes: taking fire and building walls. Each of the ships were 20 feet tall, 40 feet long, and 5 feet wide. They were heavily enchanted and runed for protection. They could also latch onto one another and stack to create a barrier. Thor's hammer could probably bend one or send it flying, but it would not break, which was the point, so nothing short of a cement truck ramming them at full speed would move them or affect the protections offered by these ships. best part of these ships was that they were invisible to anyone not wearing the enchanted gear afforded to all EPI personnel. Everyone was equipped with 3 stasis field portkey discs, and the protocol was that if you had used 2 of them, you were to withdraw and let someone else take your place. The third was built into the uniform. You could not save lives if you were dead after all. Once everyone was in place and communications were up, with the command tent having a view on all active combatants and a remote activation for each soldier's last stasis disc, the Avengers started moving in. Their goal was to draw the attention of the enemy while the soldiers moved in and the ghost squads did what they were meant to do. By disrupting the chain of command, they hoped to have an easier victory. The signal was given, and the Avengers leapt into action, completely destroying the first bunker they came to. Hulk was really enjoying the game he and Wolverine started, of counting how many they could each put down. Sif and Thor had decided to go with them, and so far she was leading, not really shocking anyone, but that didn't mean they were giving up either. Natasha and Clint teamed up as they often did, and Steve went in with a bike. A normal one, as Steve decided to leave his own Skyline at home, considering he tended to use bikes in battle as disposable commodities. Tony was trying to take down the facility's energy shield as the Ghost Squad had been unable to find its source. Harry was fuming as he had been told that he would be backup, and needed to stay in the command tent to monitor where he might be needed. With the Ghost in play, the soldiers wouldn't get to have any fun, the field commander had said. He made a good point, though. While all the soldiers respected Harry a whole hell of a lot, they had not been able to prove themselves useful to the company. This was to be their first engagement, and they all wanted to prove themselves. With the Avengers already helping, morale could not be higher, and the soldiers were ready for war. So when the order was given, it was with quiet determination and not a cry of war that they descended on their enemies from a flanking position. The Hydra soldiers didn't seem to know what to do, and soon they split their focus between the 2 attacking fronts, making them all the easier to take out. The mobile bunker ships had already moved into position to help protect the town from the fire it could potentially start taking, and before the shots started raining down on the town, they had been stopped. One bunker ship was also in front of the 3 tents, just in case. Harry watched as everyone did what they did best. He may have watched Natasha more than the others, but nobody would blame him for that. She was magnificent as always, and it was while he was watching her that he heard Clint grunt. His view showed him lying on the ground, having apparently been bowled over by something. "What's going on, Clint?" Harry asked. "Someone he yelled as he was struck by a weapon of some sort. "I'm on my way," Harry said. "No need, sir," a soldier said, and Harry noticed the same one who had to have 2 legs and an arm replaced. Run up to Clint and placed a disc on his chest. Clint disappeared. "Good job, soldier," one of the commanders said. "Did you see what happened?" "I only saw him get up and take the shot from the cannon, sir," the soldier said as he took cover behind a tree from the cannon which was still firing in their direction. Harry saw Natasha throw one of her new surprises into the bunker from a different angle. She had been on her way to Clint to do the exact same thing when she noticed the soldier get him out. She then diverted and threw the grenade-like enchanted weapon into the bunker. 2 seconds later, the bunker collapsed in on itself. There were no screams as 200 GTK of gravity hit in a 20-foot radius of the grenade. It was not a pretty sight to see the broken soldiers around the bunker. "We have an enhanced on the field," Steve said suddenly, and Harry looked at his monitor. "What did you see?" Harry asked. "It was a blur," Steve answered. "I've never seen anything like this. I'll keep an eye in the sky for this blur when I see it." "I'll make it stop," Thor said as he approached and then took off. Iron Man had finally breached and disabled the energy shield and was going inside to find the scepter. Shield soldiers had closed in at this point, and the rest of the enemy combatants were put down quickly. Very few surrendered. Steve and Natasha entered the building in search of Baron Strucker. One of the Ghost Squads had reportedly tagged him, but nobody saw him when they activated the stun rod. Harry decided to join them at this point, seeing as how the only danger was an enhanced and he was uniquely qualified to capture those, so he apparated to Natasha and followed behind them invisibly. They couldn't see him, nobody could, but they knew he was there because they heard him arrive, and Natasha could feel him, and she signaled Steve, who didn't confirm it one way or another. It was a strategy they had used before when they were looking for enhanced. They would keep their eyes forward and Harry would cover their apparently unguarded backs. It worked very well. It was a couple of minutes later that they spotted Baron Strucker lying in a corridor unconscious. It seemed he was on his way out of the complex when he was knocked out. Natasha went to secure him when she was knocked down the hall by a wave of energy. Harry didn't waste any time and fired a stunner in the direction of the wave, where he then saw a figure go down. He then went to Natasha, while Steve went to place a marked disc on the unconscious figure. It was marked to indicate that the person was an enhanced. Natasha got up gingerly, smirking at Harry's concern. My fiancé gave me this nifty dragon hide armor. Someone would need to hit me a lot harder for it to even hurt. She joked. No sooner had she finished her words than a man appeared where she had been standing and she went sailing down the hall again. How was that? The man joked before he turned to Harry. Where is my sister? He demanded. Behind you, Harry said. He couldn't be sure, but it was possible that the man had looked and turned back so quickly that Harry couldn't tell. So you're fast. Faster than the man started, only to crumple to the ground. Natasha came out of her own invisibility with her hand behind where his head was before he was knocked out. Why do they always talk? She asked as she placed another marked disc on the man, who soon joined his sister. When she got up, she was holding her ribs gingerly. That one actually did hurt. Harry smirked at her as he went invisible again. Better get to Tony before he does something stupid. I'll heal you later when I can get you out of that dragon hide. Guys, come on, Steve whined. Relax, Steve. Dragon hide is magic resistant. He literally needs to get under it to heal me. Natasha said with a smirk as they turned down the hall to go look for Stark. Natasha put a finger to her ear. We had a second enhanced. But Ghost got one of them and I got the other. We're on our way to Stark. What they found in the basement was a treasure trove of Chitauri tech and half-finished robots. The prize of the day, however, was the scepter once wielded by Loki. Tony was checking through the system when they got to him. Hi guys, I was just checking what they were doing here. Tony said, where's Ghost? He asked. Right here, Harry said. He's staying concealed in case there are other enhanced. Natasha said, good idea. Tony nodded. Anyway, you remember the day we gave Jarvis a makeover? He asked, not waiting for an answer. Well, there was a hack that day, but they were blocked. Apparently it came from here. From what I can see, they were trying to make some sort of AI. They probably wanted help with the programming by copying some of Jarvis. Steve looked around. Haven't you already faced robots? He asked. Not individually intelligent ones, no, Tony said. If they were trying to make some sort of learning adaptive robot, it could have actually started posing a threat. Especially with the scepter running the show, we still don't know what it's capable of. How long until your copy is complete? Natasha asked. It should be done soon. Tony said, any chance we can get this to a secure location through a portal? He asked, pointing at the scepter. Harry smirked and opened a portal and banished the scepter through it before closing the portal again. The scepter was now safely in backup plan, nowhere safer on the planet. Good. Let's finish up here and get our troops out. Steve said. He may have mentioned it once or twice, but he was really happy to be back among the men in uniform. The uniform may be different, but the cause was the same, if not slightly better. I need to see the butcher's bill before we can start celebrating. The mood became somber quickly and Harry apparated out. He wanted that information too, but he needed to see it himself, not just hear it. He went to the field hospital first. There were only a few people there, mostly strays and ricochets. Next, Harry went to the command tent. Give me some good news, gentlemen. He said. The men in the command tent turned to him and his spirits rose ever so slightly when he saw smiles all around. Our boys did a good job out there and they looked out for each other like they were trained. We have 0 fatalities, though we do have one man that lost an eye. He is currently in stasis, so that he doesn't suffer. One of the commanders said. He was an older gentleman, served in the Marines if Harry remembered correctly. He was one of those who just wanted to feel useful again after retirement. A couple of potions to fix a bad knee and repair some muscle damage, and he was jumping at the chance to be of help. Literally. That is great news, Harry said in relief. We'll obviously sort out a replacement for him. And make sure it looks just like the one he lost. The boys like to brag about how much of them have been replaced. An eye scores you some high points. The same commander said with a smile. He'll probably not miss the one he lost. That's horrible. Harry said, that's what being a soldier means. We joke about it because if it's not funny, it's painful. The commander said with a straight face. Fair enough, Harry said. Do me a favor and treat the men to a couple of rounds on me. Can do, sir, the commander replied with a salute and a smile. Once everyone was gathered and behind closed doors, Harry transported them to the detention facility. There he looked for Clint, and when he found him, he removed the stasis, stunned him and healed him. Once that was done, he woke him up again. Welcome back, Sleeping Beauty. Harry joked. Don't start, Clint said as he touched the unblemished skin where he had, from his perspective, been hit less than a minute ago. How did it go? Did you get the fast guy? Yeah. He's in the special detention facility and we got the scepter, Natasha said. Who took him out? Clint asked with a smirk as he got up and dusted himself off. He was still covered in the dirt of the forest. Where's my bow? He asked, suddenly realizing the bow, which was lying next to him in the forest, was not with him. Oh right, Natasha said as she took the miniaturized bow from her pocket and canceled the magic on it. Harry shrunk it for me. Natasha had found that, as long as it was a magical function that was prepared beforehand, she could activate it. Thanks, Clint said. It was his favorite bow. It was still the indestructible one Harry had given him more than 2 years back. Natasha took the fast guy out, Harry said, changing the subject. He decided to hit her and turn his back on her to start a chat with me. They never do that with me. Clint whined. That's because you attack from far away. Natasha chuckled. Are you ready to go say hi to your new friend? Clint just grumbled as he got up and started walking to where the special detention facility was. Harry smirked and turned a portal in front of him, and he was suddenly there. Oh right, he said lamely when Harry smiled at him. Give me a break, I was literally just shot, knocked out and healed in the course of a couple of minutes. They arrived in front of the small cells, where the 2 powered individuals were still unconscious and in stasis. Harry summoned the stasis discs and enervated the man first. His eyes opened and he was up and looking around instantly. Where is my sister? Hey fast guy, remember me? Clint said. Where is my sister? He demanded. Harry made their adjoining wall invisible so that the man could see her. She's safe and sound, just unconscious, he told him. How did you capture us? He asked. What? Didn't see that coming, Clint mocked him. You will not hold us forever, he threatened. We don't intend to, though we very well could, Harry said. He lifted his arm and called Professor Charles Xavier into his mirror. A couple of seconds later, Charles answered, Ghost, how can I help? He knew Harry would be all business when he called in his armor. Do you have a moment to come speak to a new friend in our special detention facility? Harry asked. I can be there in a minute, Charles said instantly. Good, thank you, Harry said as he closed the connection. Charles Xavier is the man you want to be friendly with. He's the man who will see you, either in a jail cell or in therapy. I warn you to be nice to him, as he's the only one that's on your side after you attacked my people. To emphasize his threat, he used his magic to levitate the man and held him to the wall. Don't try it again. Natasha spoke up then, knowing Harry was playing the role of bad cop. You have to forgive Ghost, he's kind of protective of his people. When people like you who work for Hydra try to attack his teammates and friends, he takes it personally, she said with a shrug. Also, please know that no matter what Professor Xavier finds, you will still be tried under truth serum, so I suggest you speak the truth from the beginning and willingly. The man had frozen and looked at Ghost with narrowed eyes. He's worried that you have the same power as his sister. He might even be right, Charles Xavier said as he walked up to them, having come as soon as he could using the portkey he had for this purpose. He was always the man that they called when working with Enhanced. His job was to evaluate and decide how to handle each case. For some, he suggested that Harry help them with some sort of modification or item that could help them fit into society, which was their cause for doing what they did when they were rejected for being different. For others, he suggested a temporary block on their powers, which he or Harry had to handle on a case-by-case basis. Both of those cases would receive therapy as well. Sometimes, though, they ended up having to stop their powers permanently by using whatever means would work before having them locked up. Therapy would still be offered, but only to help settle people into prison. It was unfortunate that people's powers were sometimes the cause of their behavior, though. More often than not, a criminal was a criminal by choice. The power was just a bonus. Really? Harry said. We'll have to prioritize her assessment then. Let me know if there's anything you need. I can handle these too, Charles said with a smile. Congratulations on your victory. Harry nodded in thanks, conjured a chair for Charles, and started walking back to the exit, not wanting to show the man his portals. Charles' eyes widened as a thought crossed the man's mind. And Ghost, he called after him, be careful with that scepter. They were doing something with it, preparing it for something big. Thanks for the heads up, Harry called back as the man rammed the cell's door in impotent rage. Now where should we start? Harry heard Charles say before he opened the portal, and they left the psychic to do what psychics do best. I'm going to go look in on our soldier who lost the eye, Harry said as he closed the portal behind them. The team had to still write up reports and debrief. He could skip that, which he loved reminding Natasha about. She just reminded him that once they were married, she'd be able to do the same, because who in their right minds would think they could order the boss's wife? The soldier had already been transported to a hospital bed, and Harry found him just in time before they could remove the stasis. When they did, he instantly hit the man with a stunner. A quick look confirmed it was beyond his ability to repair, not like he had for the man in Germany, whose retina was still intact. Hopefully by the time they woke him up, his new eye will be in and he won't even notice the difference. He let the doctors take him to surgery, so that they could remove the remnants of the ruined optical organ and to clean out the wound. Then they would use some of Dr. Banner's potions to heal the open wound, before inserting the replacement eye. Fortunately, there were a couple of the enchanted eyes in stock. Harry would have changed the color had the eyes not had replicable irises for that specific reason. That was something the techs had come up with. Harry next went to look for the soldier that had rescued Clint. He found him at the barracks doing push-ups of all things with a big smile on his face. "Do those even do anything for you anymore?" Harry asked as he stepped up next to him. The soldier looked up and instantly jumped to attention and saluted Harry. "Sir, yes sir," he said with a face-splitting smile. "I still have one limb of my own, sir. The doctors refused to take that one and give me the full set, sir." He joked. Harry chuckled. "At ease, soldier. I've told you guys I'm not brass, I'm just the one that pays the bills." The soldier went from attention to parade rest but seemed more at ease in that position anyway. "Between you and me, sir, it doesn't really matter. Without you I wouldn't be here. I was in a bad way after Afghanistan. I wasn't going to be a burden on my family. I really believed I should have died with the rest of my unit." "I'm sorry to hear that," Harry said sadly. He didn't know every soldier's background after all. He very seldom connected with these guys. On a whim he conjured an ice-cold butterbeer for both of them and handed the other one to the soldier. "To the fallen," he said, holding out his drink, thinking of the days he was also on the front lines of a war. "To the fallen." The man toasted, but he did not drink. "What's wrong?" Harry asked. "I'm an alcoholic, sir. I've been clean since I joined up, but I don't want to risk it." The soldier apologized. Harry nodded in understanding before waving his hand and removing even the taste of alcohol from the man's drink. "It's clean, you don't have to worry," Harry said. "I'll see about setting up a non-alcoholic beer dispenser in the cafeteria for those of you who'd prefer that." Harry understood that even though the drink would turn to water later, the taste of alcohol might have a negative effect on recovering alcoholics. "Wouldn't that be expensive, sir?" the soldier said as he took a sip and smiled. "This is really good. What's it called?" "Butter beer," Harry said. "The ones I make are normally non-alcoholic anyway. But it would taste like an alcoholic drink. I only recently figured out how to modify it so that I could offer it to children. They always complain that it smells good and I didn't want to get them used to the taste of alcohol." He explained. "As for expense, even if I couldn't make it so that it turns water into a temporary drink, you guys deserve it for your hard work." "Thank you, sir," the soldier said. "What's your name, by the way?" Harry asked. "Corporal John Kowalski, sir," the now identified John said. "John, I hear you guys like to brag about how much of you has been replaced." Harry said, "How much of that is true?" Jack smiled broadly. "The replacements don't get tired, so those of us with 2 or more replacements have started outperforming the regular soldiers. They joke that we are the lucky ones. I tend to agree, though I do wish I could have kept the tattoo I had on my old arm. It was the one I got with my old unit." He finished sadly. Harry perked up and quickly retrieved his pensive tablet from his desk again. "Do me a favor and close your eyes and think of the moment you saw your tattoo the first time." The soldier closed his eyes instantly and did not react when he felt a finger on his temple. "Good, now open your eyes." When John opened his eyes, he saw 2 stools and a table in front of him. Harry indicated for him to take a seat and place the tablet which held the memory on the table. "This is my way of thanking you for being there for Hawkeye. I know it was your duty, but where I come from, good deeds are rewarded," Harry said when the man looked like he was about to object. "Now I want you to place a finger on the tablet like this," Harry said as he placed his own finger on the tablet's face. He had already cast some privacy charms for them. Harry was waiting in the memory when the man arrived. He recognized the scene instantly and knew what he was seeing. The sad smile on his face was all Harry needed to see to know he had made the correct decision. They watched as a younger John inspected the tattoo for the first time in a mirror, while 2 of his friends were still being tattooed and the rest stood there smiling and laughing and telling jokes. Too soon for John, the memory ended and he quickly looked away to hide the tears. "Thank you, sir," was all he said. Harry had wanted to see the tattoo, but now he had another idea. He quickly opened a small portal and took a rune-reinforced vial from one of his workshops. Then he lifted the memory out of the tablet and put it in the vial. Before the man could look back at him, Harry cast a spell and placed the same marking on the man's new arm. "Here," Harry said, holding out the memory in a vial. John turned to him and Harry said, "This is the memory you just watched. This is tangible proof of your bond with your old unit. Even if that," Harry pointed at the reproduction of the tattoo, "is just a replica, the memory is real." John looked at his arm before taking the vial of shimmering blue liquid. He was too moved to speak at this point. Harry noticed and said, "Don't worry about people seeing you right now. This place is hidden for the next 5 minutes. Take your time." As Harry made to move away, John spoke, "Thank you, sir, for everything." Harry nodded and continued on his way. His next stop was to go give a recommendation for Corporal John Kowalski to get a promotion. He knew it wasn't his place, but he felt he owed it to the man anyway. He would by no means force the issue either, but he wanted it on John's record that he had been recommended for promotion at the least. After that, he went to go speak to Tony, who was back in his lab working on one of his many ongoing projects. His other wall now had another mirror that showed Bruce's lab, making all three of theirs seem connected even if they were in fact connected by portals. "How are things going here?" Harry asked. "Just going over some of the data we collected from the Hydra base. I wanted to find out how they had modified the enhanced. Hydra did not have that kind of power before." Tony said, "Probably something to do with the scepter." Harry said, "Xavier told us that Hydra was preparing for something huge and that it had something to do with the scepter. Maybe I should analyze it then, to find out what exactly they were doing with it." Tony suggested. "I don't think it's a good idea, Tony." Harry said, "That scepter has only given us grief. Who's going to have access to it here? We're in 3 of the most secure locations on the planet. The only people who have access are under contract." Tony said as he pointed at Bruce, who had just walked into his own lab with a sandwich halfway raised to his mouth where it froze. "Do you think Bruce is going to want to play with the glow stick of destiny?" Bruce lowered the sandwich back to the plate. "What are we talking about?" "Tony wants to have access to the scepter and I'm thinking it's a horrible idea," Harry said. "At least look through the data first. I don't want that thing affecting your systems. You saw what they were building down there. For all we know, the scepter was supposed to power those robots." Harry does have a point. You have all the fabricators, not to mention the rune facilities, all connected to your lab. Bruce agreed. Tony nodded. "I'm not going to argue about that, it's just so damn tantalizing. I know where the last puzzle piece is, and if I had it all this data would make sense, but you are right, both of you." Tony relented. They would have to just wait for all the interviews and Strucker's interrogations to be completed. A few days later, Harry's face had blanched when everything came together. "You're telling me there's a malicious AI which they built from scratch, since they couldn't copy Jarvis, all set up on the scepter, which Strucker used to control scientists to both modify the Maximoffs and plan the creation of a vibranium-based robot that he wanted to unleash on the world. Did I miss anything? There were also the beginnings of what looks like a plan for an android body with some really nifty abilities." Bruce put in from his workstation. "Only after all the interviews were complete did they get all the information they needed to finish the puzzle." "Don't," Tony said suddenly as Harry looked at him smugly. "Tell me you told me so. I listened to you then, you don't need to rub it in." Tony then turned to Bruce and walked through the portal to his lab. Harry followed. "How is he going to make this android?" "Like I said, it's just the beginnings of a plan." Bruce clarified. "There's not a lot here. There's a mention of the vibranium and Dr. Helen Cho from Seoul. We were working together on her cradle a couple of months back. It's a wonderful machine that can print living tissue like a 3D printer." Bruce said, "You don't think they were planning on?" Tony started as he went through what was there. "Let me know if you need me." Harry said, "Sure thing," Tony muttered as he continued working and looking at the data. The technobabble became too much for Harry, who decided to rather retire to his own lab and continue his personal super soldier project. He almost had the first part down. He was working on a way for one enchantment to be connected to other enchantments, the way he could seemingly channel one enchantment through another already. Once that was done, he planned on seeing how many of what kinds of enchantments could be run through one item. He suspected that he would, personally, be able to connect to as many as he was aware of, although normal people would struggle past a certain point, unless they trained at it. The more familiar someone became with a piece of magic, the easier it would become to control more enchantments. Harry's constant effort and involvement with enchantments, while simultaneously learning how to think differently by the geniuses he surrounded himself by, and the fact that he had quickly mastered the intent-based magic of the Aesir, had left him with a very unique perspective, and his love of his craft just kept growing. There was seldom a day that passed these days that Harry was not in at least 3 different workshops for the entire day, on top of spending a normal day at work and spending time with his girl. He would sometimes take her along so that she could have a day off. She was completely aware of how much time he was spending on his projects, but didn't mind as long as he kept being honest with her. Jarvis had begun suspecting that something was going on when Harry suddenly got a whole week's worth of work done in 10 minutes, or what seemed to be 10 minutes. Harry had finally relented and told him of what he was doing, but not how. Jarvis understood and resolved to help Harry plan his days better, now that he knew what was possible. His studies into psychology had given him the insight he needed to suggest for Harry to take time off too, since no man could do all of what Harry was doing and stay mentally stable. Harry had admitted that there were days that he missed Natasha, but he knew another him was spending time with her already that day, so he couldn't see her. Fortunately, that just meant he had to go to sleep, break the cycle and see her the next day. That did not sate him entirely, but he did sometimes take an entire weekend off so that he could shower his girl with love. She never complained. A month after they had taken down the Hydra base, Tony had had the bright idea to upload the AI in the scepter to a virtual environment. Jarvis had helped set it up, and a copy of 2.0 was placed on said environment for the malicious AI to connect to. When that was set up, all physical and wireless connections were cut and interrupted, and a magical barrier was raised around the whole setup. One day after powering on the mainframe, the virtual environment had a catastrophic failure when the angry AI decided to rather die than reveal any of its secrets. Little did it know that it was on a machine in a machine, and there was no way for him to access the outside world or destroy the physical systems from inside. Tony had loved going through the data, until he discovered the AI's tendency toward escalation and violence. There was even some sort of plan, dreamt up by yet another scientist, which would use some of the vibranium to create an artificial extinction-level event. Tony had reluctantly told the team that his earlier plans to inspect the scepter might have caused the unleashing of an enemy that could have done more damage than Loki had it not been for Harry and Bruce's insistence that they take things slowly. It was heartening for Harry when Steve was the one to stand up for him, saying that Tony was not to blame for the machinations of others, and that the situation was handled correctly. He had clapped Tony on the shoulder and told him that he had come a long way from doesn't play well with others. Tony had smirked at him and told him he could still kick his ancient ass before acting like he was sorry about swearing. Steve just shook his head at the jab about his slip in the field during their attack on Hydra. It was something for the team to laugh about together, and Steve didn't mind that at all, even if it was at his expense. It was yet another couple of months later that Tony and Bruce had a breakthrough with Dr. Cho. They had already found and returned the stolen vibranium to Wakanda and opened talks with their king. It was a big victory as Wakanda was a very secretive country and rarely opened their borders to outsiders. EPI was now on a very short list of friends to the Wakandan people. Harry had secretly gone to visit them and discovered their reasons to be secretive, but didn't reveal anything, except to stress how much they needed to ally with them. He'd have to pay them back at a later date for the broken holographic generator his magic had accidentally destroyed. They had gone to their other supplier for vibranium, Yondu. He had been more than happy to help and supplied them with what amounted to be 5 times the amount as they had returned to Wakanda, for the low price of 1,000 bottles of fully enchanted 50-year-old fire whiskey. He did not say where the vibranium came from, but it looked like it came from the hull of a ship. Harry had decided it was about time that they signed a new contract. Theft would be okay, it was Yondu's profession after all, as long as nobody died as a result of the theft. Yondu had grumbled about people being unreasonable but had signed it anyway. As an added bonus, Harry promised to install a room of requirement for his ship, for their next delivery, even though he'd have to put it under Fidelius and only he and his first mate, Kraglin, would be able to use it. Yondu had been more than happy with what he got out of the deal and was planning on targeting a mine he knew about for more precious metals for his generous new benefactors. The vibranium went straight into storage in Harry's vault, but he allowed Tony to use it as needed. As long as Harry also had some to play with, he had some ideas for what he could do with such a versatile metal. Tony already wanted Harry to help him with his vibranium projects. Bruce, Tony and Dr. Cho worked with Jarvis to create what would later be known as the Vision, an android seen in a vision by a scientist under the scepter's influence. Jarvis had done the programming himself, and the Vision would be a second body for his consciousness. Nobody wanted to trust such a powerful android body to an unknown or untested artificial intelligence, and they kept the scepter far away from the project. Jarvis had agreed, but only as long as he wasn't used as a weapon. He was a person and he wanted to live his life without regrets. Speaking of Jarvis, there seemed to be some sort of connection forming between him and the Maximoff girl. Wanda had been loath to believe what she had been told about the AI's plans for the world, until she saw the memories herself when he and Jarvis went to confirm them. When she couldn't read Harry's mind, Jarvis offered her his own assurances. She had marveled at the mind she had found in Jarvis and had sought him out after that. She was not really given free rein, but had been given a demonstration of the contract and how it worked without revealing anything, and after much deliberation and a caveat that they didn't have to interact with Stark, she and her brother had signed. Where Wanda went, there also went Pietro, or Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, which were apparently their code names. Harry had been assured by Charles that, while the twins were still emotionally unstable, they weren't bad people. His own contract with EPI ensured that he kept private information off the record for the patient's safety and peace of mind, unless it was life-threatening. Harry had taken his word for it, but that did not stop protocol from having them go through questioning while under the effects of Veritaserum. Because of his depth of knowledge and the fact that he knew which questions to ask, Charles Xavier did the questioning. It confirmed a deep hatred for Tony based on losing their parents to a bomb strike, using Stark Industries weapons when they were young. Harry couldn't fault them, but he wouldn't blame Ollivander for selling a wand to Tom Riddle either. After all, if Stark Industries hadn't sold the weapons, the people who needed them would have gotten them somewhere else. He resolved to have that discussion at a later date. For now, he wanted to start looking into Wanda's supposed magic powers. It certainly felt like magic to him. So it was that Harry invited the Maximoffs to New Atlantis, so that he could introduce them to the idea of magic as he knew it. Natasha was both at the office and with him, but nobody knew about the former since it was still the best-kept secret Harry had, that and being the Master of Death. When they exited the portal, he welcomed them as he always did. "Welcome to New Atlantis," he said with widespread arms. A couple of nymphs were around the pool, sunbathing and chatting happily, or they had been until Harry showed up. That's when they all got up and ran over to him, giggling and hugging him merrily. "And you are fine with this?" Wanda asked. Jarvis, who had yet to experience New Atlantis in the flesh, had tagged along. Harry had made him promise not to work and he had complied. When on New Atlantis, do as the New Atlanteans do after all. Natasha encourages it. He replied for her. "Those are wood nymphs, they are magical beings and they have a need for physical contact with Harry since he's basically their god and king." "He is not a god though," Wanda said with a frown. "Exactly," Harry encouraged from where he was still hugging the girls. "Well, technically," Natasha began. "No, you heard her," Harry said with finality. "She's obviously an expert at these things. Come, let's have a drink and relax before the rest show up," he encouraged, having successfully changed the subject. "What do you mean rest?" Wanda asked. "Nice, you have a bar," Pietro said before Harry could answer as he zipped to it, intent on getting himself a drink. Unfortunately, the magic protecting the bar kicked him out at the same speed he had entered and he went flying into the pool with a huge splash. "Yeah, you can't enter Harry's bar without permission," Natasha said to Wanda conversationally as they walked up to it. "It's magically protected. Only 3 people on the planet can enter it." 5, Harry said. "You forgot Loki and Samantha." "Right, but that only counts when you are here for Samantha and Loki isn't on the planet right now," Natasha countered. "Technicalities," Harry scoffed as he walked behind the bar. "What can I get you?" Harry asked as a sopping wet Pietro walked to the bar. He lifted a hand and Pietro was suddenly dry. "Useful," Pietro said. "You don't know the half of it." Jarvis chuckled. "Could I try a Virgin Bahama Mama, please?" "No," Harry said easily. "You wanted the human experience and today you will have a drink with me." "Are you sure it's wise?" Jarvis started. "Would you rather wait for Tony to be here?" Harry asked. "Good point," Jarvis conceded. "Very well, but can you keep it light? This will be my first drink and I'd rather enjoy the flavor than the effect." Harry smiled and nodded. As he reached for the required ingredients, they started moving on their own. Harry watched in shock. "Why does this keep happening? Is your magic doing something new again?" Natasha asked. "I've seen you do this with your magic before, it's nothing new." She shrugged. "Maybe your magic is trying to be useful, but it's not supposed to be useful without my telling it to," Harry exclaimed. Suddenly the bottles fell to the floor as if invisible strings had been cut. Harry looked at the mess with narrowed eyes before he looked up with realization. "Loki, get your ass out here before I have to come looking for you." As ever, Loki made an entrance by appearing in a seated position inside the bar with a smile on his face. "Good afternoon, brother," he said with an evil smirk. Harry glared at Loki and pointed at the bottles on the floor. "Fix this." Loki chuckled and stretched his hands out to retrieve the bottles from nowhere, while the broken ones on the floor disappeared. "I would never tarnish the right you gave me to enter this bar," he said. It was so much fun to hold it over Thor's head. He'd never push Harry so far as to kick him out. Harry was still contemplating just that when he relented. It was what Loki did after all. "Fine, but you get to play bartender all weekend." As he left the bar, Harry added a word to keep Loki in. Loki had felt the magic happening but didn't know what it was until it was too late. "I suppose I deserve that," he said as he realized he was truly locked in. How was Harry able to form a ward that quickly? Even he needed a couple of minutes for it. "What are you doing here anyway?" Harry asked as he stopped feeding from his personal magic reserve. He'd feed it some energy over the next couple of minutes and it will be full again. He discovered that having a vast source of energy to tap as fast as he wanted allowed him to form spells much more quickly. He would have been able to do what he did just now reasonably easily, but never as quickly, not without an enchantment. He smirked at the look of confusion from Loki but didn't explain. "I heard you were planning on bringing a new magic user to the island. How could I resist?" Loki asked. "Her power is definitely magical, but I don't know if it's the same as ours." Harry said, "I'd like to explore that before we get into training her." Loki nodded but was stopped from talking when there was a sound of many bare feet following the path to the bar quickly. And here come the rest, Harry said as he left his seat at the bar and walked to the approaching horde of nymphs. Their number had increased quite a lot. As Harry hugged them, he remembered how they had found the new additions. Flashback Sif had heard of a possible location, where more nymphs and some elves were being kept as house pets on Vanaheim. She reported that she had found the owner having fallen upon his sword before she could get to him. The fact that she was cleaning her sword as she said it didn't register with Harry at all. He didn't even plan on having her sword enchanted so that she'd never need to clean it again. No, sir, not at all. Harry had gone to fetch the nymphs as they could not leave their trees, which was apparently how their kind was traditionally kept hostage. If they stepped out of line or refused to listen, their trees would be threatened. The elves were threatened by the same means. The nymphs would suffer for their misdeeds. The ex-slaves were questioned and some alarming news came to light. There were more, so many more, so Harry started getting any information he could. Next, Harry planned a couple of raids to the nobility of Vanaheim, all done invisibly with Natasha, Logan, and Sif. What he found in some of the manors and castles astounded and sickened him. Fortunately, not many of the nobles were guilty, as most were loyal to Asgard and followed the laws. The few, though, that thought themselves above the law, were made note of, even as the slaves were quickly and quietly extracted back to a safe location, where Frigga was waiting with her healers. There were also some wealthy merchants to liberate from, and every time, their list of people to rescue grew when they questioned the slaves. On the last raid, which Sif had specifically left for last, Harry had liberated another 22 nymphs and some 30 elves. Harry had returned them all to Asgard as well, where they would be cared for by Frigga's healers. When he closed the portal, having given his last smile and reassurance to a little girl around Samantha's age, his vision, which had started getting red around the edges, burst into full-blood red. Oh shit! Natasha cursed when she felt his emotions explode from him in waves of menace. Harry, we need to get out of here before you do something you'll regret. Harry looked at her, tears flowing down his face, even with his rage having taken him completely over. He did not want to suppress this feeling, not after everything he had seen. Some of these nobles delighted in neglecting their slaves. This last one, though, liked to leave them laying around after beating them to within an inch of their lives. He delighted in it because the nymph would heal as long as their tree was there for them to return to. He'd allow them just enough time to recover before doing it all over again. That's why he had so many, so that he could do it every day. I can't do nothing, Harry pleaded. Didn't you see the little girl? He finished vehemently as his emotions started icing over when he saw a vision of Samantha, bruised, beaten, and half-starved. He was about to unleash his fiendfire on the castle when he heard a voice he did not want to hear at that moment. Harry, listen to me. Harry turned to see Natasha holding up her mirror to him. Odin's face was on the other side. Listen, son, you are scaring Natasha. There was an urgency in Odin's voice and a look of fear in his eyes. You are scaring me. Please let us handle this. Do not sully your hands with this man's unclean soul. What awaits him in hell is his deserved punishment. I will see to it that justice is carried out myself, I swear it. The last was spat with real anger. Odin did not like what he was hearing, and this last man would wish his tormentors were as kind as he was to his slaves. Before he would be granted the mercy of an honorless death and the tortures that awaited him thereafter. Harry stood there while contemplating. The rage had somehow summoned a calm over him, a sort of mad clarity. How long had he been doing this? Harry was certain at that moment that he should have killed this man and all men like him a long time ago. There was something wrong with a world that allowed such evil to live. This monster had to die, be destroyed completely. It was as simple as that. He could not be allowed to continue living and cause more pain to people. Harry wanted to see the look on his face when he realized who exactly he had angered. Harry was about to turn away again when he saw Natasha's face. What emotion was it that he saw in her eyes? It was so tantalizing for a second to try and figure it out. He'd seen it before, he'd experienced it. Then it hit him. She was showing pure, unadulterated fear. Not fear of him, but for him. Why would she be afraid for him? Nothing could hurt him. He was the master of death. Nothing could harm him, not for long anyway. It would take just one spark and the fiendfire would devour this pit of evil and all who dwelled in it. No evil would be able to dwell here again. That's when he heard a voice in the back of his head. I want you to look at me when I kill you. I want to see the light leave your eyes. Tom Riddle, a madman, had once spouted this to him as they fought in a graveyard. Harry had seen the madness in those eyes many times. He feared that madness more than he feared the man. The madness that meant he would do anything, hurt anyone to achieve his goals. There was no stopping it once he'd made a decision to do something. And what he had decided was monstrous. Is that what Natasha was seeing? This thought finally shook him back to his senses, and he worked up the willpower to fortify his occlumency to contain his emotions. Odin nodded with relief and ended the connection from his side. For a moment, Harry saw a face he did not recognize in the reflection. His eyes were still shining a cold, bright green, but they were cast in an unnatural shadow, so it looked like his eyes were the only thing under the mask and hood. His whole visage was overlay on a background of undulating black and red. In the moment he saw it, he saw the shadow was quickly fading, as was his aura. Odin had likely closed the connection so that he could see himself and know. Harry sat down where he had stood as he suddenly realized he had been unconsciously channeling the power of his ring, the one connected to the most powerful source of stored magic he knew of and owned. The magic sang in his veins, but it needed a release, or it might just explode from him and kill those around him, and he couldn't store it back fast enough. He looked at Natasha in worry as he started to shake from the effort of holding the power, when half an idea hit him. He loved her so much, he could almost instantly fill his entire mind with the feeling, and so that's what he did, completely rejecting any other feeling so that he could make the spell work just as he learned to so many years ago. Then he started applying his intent to the magic, protection, love, and support. Then, before he could even think of the spell, a stag erupted from his hand. There was an actual recoil as all the excess energy left him, and he was bowled over and rolled on the ground for a couple of yards. When he came to a stop, he looked up to see a white stag. It was not a specter, and it was not a patronus as he knew it either. It seemed to have real weight as it stepped on the soil and nuzzled at Natasha's neck. She was looking into its glowing green eyes in awe. Some part of her was aware of Harry laying on the ground and getting up slowly. But what she felt from this creature was more than she thought possible, and she couldn't help but stare at it. When it nuzzled her, she felt more loved and secure than she had in her entire life. Her face was wet with tears as the creature made her feel unworthy of what she was feeling. Harry was unaffected by the presence of the stag, as it could only promote the amount of feeling that he had put into it. He was aware of the fact that this creature had actual substance, when in a flash of fire, Fawkes appeared and landed on its back. Fawkes started communicating with him in the way familiars do. Harry listened before nodding and opening a portal to the island. The stag nuzzled at Natasha one more time and then walked through the portal to go become what it was meant to. Harry looked after it in confusion. At least it seemed there was a reason for all of this. When he looked back, Sif, Logan, and Natasha were staring at him. "Sorry," Harry mumbled. "Don't worry about it, kid," Logan said, recovering first and smirking. "I've gone nuts a time or two myself. You did pretty good controlling yourself. Last time I lost control, a lot of people died. It is fortuitous that you found yourself," Sif added. "I would have missed the person you are now had you decided to become what you were becoming." "And what's that?" Harry asked softly as Natasha walked to him and embraced him softly, tears still rolling down her eyes. "An avatar of vengeance," Sif said simply. "Your power was so great that I feared any that touched you might be hurt." She had meant to say cease to be, but decided to spare him that revelation. From her perspective, Harry's face had darkened, his eyes had shone, and his power had started moving the ground beneath their feet in ways only she could feel. Massive amounts of energy had leaked from him and suffused the ground in such a way that those predisposed to magic might one day find this spot and find that it is a place of power, as spoken of in the legends. His aura of power had changed in size and color, from its usual limited range from his skin and faint yellow as she perceived it, to large enough to swallow any person who came too close, and in an angry dark red. "I'm sorry that I scared you," Harry whispered in his girl's ear. She nodded and just held him. After a minute, Sif whispered, "A guard is on his way. Are we still undetectable? Your power must have roused many this night." The castle was a bit away from the town, so they had felt safe enough when the guards seemed rather lax in their attentiveness. Who would attack their lord after all? A couple of spells had made the guards take a nice nap while giving them the freedom to search the castle and its grounds. Harry was shocked for a moment, not because of the invisibility, because that was still fine, but because of the fact that he had seriously contemplated burning down the castle with all the servants and guards still in it. He shuddered. Natasha must have noticed, and she looked up at him. "You'll be fine, you didn't lose yourself." Harry nodded at her and then looked at Sif. "We are still hidden, but we might as well leave. I need to rest, and all the slaves have been freed." He turned a portal into being and allowed the others to step through first, but Natasha held his hand. He was not sure if it was to make sure he followed or if she simply wanted the contact, but he didn't mind. They arrived back on the island and Harry turned to the house, while Natasha stayed for a moment to thank the others for going with to help. "No problem," Logan said, looking after Harry as he disappeared into the house. "Go take care of your man while I go see what the newcomer is doing." Logan looked off to the side where there was a soft glow over the closest hill. It was fading into the forest-like foliage that had started to sprout since the nymphs took residence in their new home. He could also feel the same power coming from off in that direction as he'd felt from the stag, back on Vanaheim. Logan had watched Natasha go to the house, and then he'd started stalking towards where he knew the stag had gone in the middle of the island. Sif following behind him, her own connection to the earth telling her something big was about to happen. They arrived to find the stag standing in the middle of a clearing in the woods, which was right next to the plateau where Harry had planned to put a waterfall at some point, since there was a rock face that would make for a nice water feature, and would create a perfect place for Harry to put water-dwelling creatures when they found some one day. The stag was standing on a rock outcropping which was surrounded by a pool of shallow water, which was fed by a waterfall that hadn't been there before. When did that happen? That's when the stag turned and looked right at Logan. Something passed between them and Logan didn't understand it, but he knew this creature was intelligent somehow even though it had only been created a short while ago. Sif gasped and Logan looked at her. "What?" he asked. "I have heard of it but never thought I'd see it," she said, not answering the question as she went down on her knees and sat down a respectful distance away behind the tree line. The stag looked at the plateau, which could be said to be the heart of the island. Being in the center and where most of the magical creatures called home, Fawkes lifted up and hovered above the stag while singing a song of protection, love, and support. The very emotions and ideals Harry had used to create the living embodiment of those things. "What's happening?" Logan asked again as the stag started to glow. He had noted some of the creatures under his care had started showing up, but none of them entered the clearing, staying just on the other side of the tree line. Something very natural but also primal was happening here, if the animals and creatures knew what to do in this situation. None of them looked worried though, so that helped him relax as he decided to follow their lead and stepped back to where Sif had taken her seat. He sat down next to her in the same position which he recognized as the Caesar. When he was seated she spoke to him very quietly. "We are witnessing the birth of something. Harry refers to this as a genius loci. He mentioned to me once that his old school was supposedly alive and could do things on its own. This is the start of New Atlantis life. I have never witnessed the beginning of such a thing, but I have been to many living locations." Logan, suddenly realizing the importance of this, took out his mirror. "Harry Potter," he whispered into it. He just knew Harry would like to witness this. "Yes," came the sad reply a couple of seconds later. "Are you aware of what is happening on the island right now?" Logan asked. Fawkes informed me, yes, Harry said sadly. "He said he'd let me know how it went. Don't you want to see this?" Logan asked, watching as the stag's glow started extending into a pure white aura and Fawkes' song grew in strength. The aura was starting to flux, elongate, and move toward the stone face as the energy pulsed every couple of seconds, much like a heartbeat. "Of course I do," Harry said. "The problem is, my emotions aren't quite settled and there is the possibility that my presence could interrupt the process, considering most of this island runs on my magic one way or the other." There was a palpable sadness in Harry's voice and Logan realized he was still dealing with what had happened earlier, so he nodded in understanding and closed the connection, determined to watch what was going on. He heard movement and looked around to see the nymphs of New Atlantis come to join them on the ground to watch what was happening. None said anything, but many of the nymphs were crying and most had eyes brimming with tears. Logan resolved to find out why later. As the light coming from the stag approached the stone face, it too started to glow, but it was not beating. It was a solid light that simply shimmered even as it was still. The aura reached the rock and the two lights made contact. The moment the stag's energy pulsed, the pulse went into the rock and it pulsed too once before stilling again. The next pulse seemed to take a bit better and the stone face pulsed twice before stilling again. The spirit is trying to make itself one with the island. The island is not alive, but it has a lot of magic and life and a certain awareness. It is trying to maintain its current state while the spirit is trying to teach it something. Sif explained, her connection to the earth giving her an insight even Harry would not have had. Like learning to breathe for the first time. It is capable but doesn't know how yet. Fawkes' song rose in pitch again, as the stag took a step towards the rock face, stepping into the water as it did so. The creatures around the clearing started making noise. To Logan it sounded like encouragement. The rock face beat to the same beat again as the stag's presence pressed itself into the rock. The water started to glow and the pulse flowed through it and under the ground for a moment before it stilled again. Suddenly Fawkes was looking at Logan. Logan realized the phoenix was waiting for something. "What do you need?" he asked aloud to the bird. "You haven't given your permission." Sif said, "The island is waiting for its caretaker to agree," she said with a smile as she pointed to Logan's knees where a tendril of energy, still as the rock wall, reached out to touch him. "What do I do?" Logan asked as he reached out to the tendril. He felt a question at its touch and a sense of connection, of common purpose, of recognition. The island was aware of him and what he had been doing. It trusted him and needed him to help decide. Logan understood now. He looked at the stag and realized its glowing eyes were on him as well. Logan nodded and said, "Yes, Instantly there was another pulse of magic from the stag, but this time the rock started beating to the same rhythm. Suddenly the aura from the stag started being pulled into the rock as it started walking toward the now beating heart of New Atlantis. The stag started to sink beneath the water as its energy, consciousness, purpose, and intent was absorbed by the island itself. The creatures around the clearing started making noises that Logan recognized as excitement. When the stag turned around and looked at Logan one last time, he could have sworn he heard a voice saying, "Thank you." Then it disappeared beneath the water, but Logan could tell it was not interrupting the water at this point. It must not have been corporeal anymore, as its energy was absorbed. The nymphs were all openly weeping now as they lay on the ground and looked like they were connecting to it in a whole new way. Now he knew why they were crying. Their island was alive before, but now it was alive and they were all connected to it. When he looked back at the location where the stag had disappeared, he saw no clearing, no waterfall. "What the hell?" he asked in confusion. "Did you think the island would leave its heart exposed to the world forever?" Sif asked as she got up. Logan suddenly realized why he had not seen the waterfall and clearing before. It must have been a representation or something that he could understand. Did it show itself that way just so I would understand? Sif smiled but shook her head. It showed itself that way so that all those living here could understand. They were all here to give their permission after all. "Why the water then?" Logan asked. "That would be this island's pool of eternity," Sif said. "What?" Logan asked. "Fountain of everlasting life," Sif tried. "Fountain of youth," Logan asked in mild shock. "Something like that," Sif agreed. "There have been many different legends of such places over the 9 realms. It is said that if one drinks from such a pool they connect their lives to that of the land as it is a source of life. Is that why nobody can ever find one, because they hide themselves?" Logan asked as he and Sif started making their way past the nymphs who had apparently decided to stay there for a while. "It would hardly be a legend if just anyone can find it." Sif scoffed. "The legends do come with 2 warnings though. Once you are joined to such a thing you could not die even if you wanted to. You would not age or become sick, but you'd also never really be able to leave the land for any extended period of time, as you'd feel drawn back. In many ways it's considered to be a curse. You gain everlasting life, only to not be allowed to live any meaningful life away from it." Logan had wanted to joke about it being like marriage, but skipped it, as he knew Sif and Bruce were walking down that path currently, especially considering the ring on her finger. "What if the land gets destroyed?" he asked instead. Sif shuddered. "It is the stuff of horror. The waters become stagnant and so does the drinker, but they still cannot die, merely exist in a place where there is no life." Logan grimaced. "It seems we don't have the whole story. People have been looking for the Fountain of Youth for generations. Nobody ever said anything about the downsides. People don't want to think about the negatives, so they stop mentioning them. Asgard relies a great deal on oral traditions where a story is told to teach a lesson." Sif explained. Logan smiled. "I think I'll tell that story around a bit myself. Maybe the next person to get the opportunity will think twice before doing something stupid." "That is wise," Sif agreed. "That's one mystery solved," Logan said with a smirk. "You don't by any chance know where the Holy Grail is, do you?" Sif smirked back and started walking faster. Logan never did get an answer from her on that one. Fast forward, Harry Harry and Natasha had spent that night quietly. Frigga had heard about Harry's situation from Odin, and had waited for Sif to give her report about the nobles from Vanaheim so that things could be set in motion. Bruce had been more than happy to supply Veritaserum for the Asgardian throne, and none of the nobles in question walked away unscathed. Some of them never walked again. Frigga had spent the night in New Atlantis in Harry's spare bedroom, which was comfortably set up for guests. With the guest house on the island, Harry hadn't had the opportunity to host someone in his house yet, but that wasn't the point. She was there. Just in case he had a relapse of that one night he had had a nightmare and almost ripped his chambers apart in Asgard. He had come through it all right, and spent the day in quiet contemplation after he had Natasha show him her memory of the event so that he could see for himself. What he had seen had scared even him. The look in his eyes was way too familiar, so he resolved to never lose control again, or at least allow some of the anger out, so that it didn't build up till he exploded like he had. Next time, the noble houses in question would be blown to smithereens. As soon as the occupants were safely outside to see it happen. Not that it mattered, since Harry's family had decided that they would not allow him to do this kind of thing again. Strict new laws came out to ensure the safety of the people. Slave ownership and cruelty to servants had already been against the law, but was now punishable by much harsher consequences, in all the realms that bent a knee to Asgard. There was some resistance, but Odin simply had those who objected investigated, and soon there were no objections as secret slaves and indentured servants were taken from those people who had objected. The elves and nymphs who had been rescued had decided to join Harry on his island when Frigga sang his praises. The elves could have gone to Elfheim, but their homes had been destroyed and some of them had made friends among the nymphs. Elfheim had once been a fairy tale land with wonders that could ensnare the mortal mind, but the lands had been all but destroyed by the dark elves millennia ago. The land still housed some magical creatures, as Harry knew, but it was not what it had once been. The harmony had been destroyed and creatures had gone mad and started acting like wild animals. That is why, when Harry agreed and offered them a place in New Atlantis, they had cautiously accepted, until they stepped foot on the island and broke out in massive smiles when they felt the life, power, and magic in the air. It was like they had come home after generations of not knowing where they should go. Harry had set up a small village for them a couple minutes' walk from the resort, and they had settled in quickly. They had started exploring the island, and Harry was happy to find that they got along well with the other creatures. They even had some knowledge that he didn't about how to treat certain maladies and prevent others. A certain plant mixed into the dragon's diet, for example, removed the need to groom so often. They also pointed out that the water in the hot spring was way too hot for her, so Harry had ended up making her own hot spring for her nearby so that she could still join them. Apparently she liked the company, which was why she showed up so often. When Logan was off working or not feeling sociable, she had come to listen to the people talk. It made her feel welcome and accepted. Who knew? After that, the elves slowly started taking over the roles performed by the constructs, except for cooking. Elves were still vegetarian, and a couple of Harry's friends liked to try to devour their body weight in meat, figuratively speaking. Except for Drax, he literally wanted to be able to do that. Harry had put his foot down at the bar, though. Sure, he'd allow someone else back there when he's entertaining guests or off working on something, but he refused to have them back there when he could be back there experimenting with cocktails and being in charge of the music. Well, when Peter Quill wasn't around, he couldn't take that from him. He did end up allowing one young gentleman to learn the craft for when he wasn't around. He was young for an elf at 62 years old. Apparently, he had been kept around for one lord's lady to play with. There were very few male elves on the island, and fortunately only 2 of them preferred the company of other men, even though unfortunately they couldn't stand each other. Harry very much did not want all those females becoming hangers-on like the nymphs had, but little did he know that the idea had already been percolating in Frigga's mind. Fast forward and flashback end, the new nymphs had settled into life reasonably quickly, though their control over their allure was not yet perfected, so Harry had to remind them to keep strict control. Greeting them as they arrived would become old quickly, as there were more than 120 of them now, including the ones on duty at the nymph house, protecting the golden apple tree sprout. It was growing quickly with their influence if Idun was to be believed, and who wouldn't? The apples were literally named after her. Once Harry had greeted everyone, he went back to the bars. He looked at Loki, who had started reaching for the syrup to start making the world's largest batch of syrupy cocktails. No, he said emphatically, but Loki started looking at the nymphs. I said no, Harry said dangerously while pointing behind the counter. Unless you want to sleep there tonight, you'll not do what you're planning. Loki glared at him and pouted. You can't let me have even a little bit of fun, can you? Harry smirked at him. You want to have fun? He asked dangerously. Loki's eyes widened and he looked like he wanted to bolt, only to remember he was trapped behind the bar. Be gentle, he asked weakly. Relax, Loki, you're going to make our guests think I'm a monster. Harry laughed and waved his hand. Okay, fine, you can leave the bar. Just behave yourself, okay? Our guests here probably think I'm crazy for hanging out with you. Wanda had been watching the bite play and she felt the magic as it happened. But she could not tell how exactly it was being done. She was used to one of 2 things happening. She could enter and manipulate the mind like telepathy, or she could have a physical effect on the world around her like telekinesis. What Harry and Loki had been doing, going invisible and creating barriers while manipulating multiple effects at once, was far above what she could do. I don't think my power is like yours, she told them. I can do maybe 2 things, but you do many things. You open portals and fly and create barriers that you don't even need to concentrate on. I don't think I can do that. Harry decided to take a page out of Odin's book and test her. He created a rose and had it appear on the table. He used intent to make it seem like it was there all along, but besides that, it was a normal conjuration. Tell me what you think of that rose, he asked, pointing at it. Wanda looked at it unimpressed. It is a flower, she said. She reached out to pick it up. The moment her hand touched it, she let go immediately. What is that? She asked in shock. How can a flower think? You tell me, Harry said. Loki was also looking at the flower when he smiled as he understood the test, nodding at Harry. Wanda touched the flower again tentatively. She closed her eyes after a moment. It is strange. It is like it is there and also not there. It's somehow. She opened her eyes and looked at Harry. This was not here a minute ago, was it? She asked. Of course it was. Pietro said. It was there when we sat down, I remember. Wanda looked between the flower Harry and Pietro, so the flower is somehow affecting our minds, in a manner, Harry said elusively. Wanda thought about it again before trying to explain to her brother. I don't know how else to explain it. The flower is thinking something at us. It wants us to believe it was there, but I can tell it was not. Harry nodded, waving a hand and vanishing the flower. Very good. He congratulated her. You have at least some talent. The flower was a construct I made. He used some specialized magic to have you think it was there before. Loki said proudly. Even if you learn everything else, there will be some things you cannot do or won't be able to learn because it's secret. Conjuration is a bit advanced, but I suspect for application and testing purposes a stinging hex would work just fine. Harry said, oh, I can do that one now, Loki said happily. Your books explain things much better than you do. I never said I'm a teacher. I was never any good at theory. I'm the kind of person that learns by doing. A lot of my spells were learned by their feel. Harry said, for example, I was never taught a specific spell to turn a person's hair pink. He wiggled his fingers and Pietro's hair turned neon pink, but I can imagine it and apply the correct amount and type of magic and that happens. Hey, I paid for that color, Pietro objected. Really, do you like that color? Harry asked as he waved his hand and turned it back. Because I can make it permanent if you want. And you can just make these things happen, Wanda asked, just by thinking and adding power. It's not quite as simple as that. Harry said, there are different kinds of magic in the world, they follow laws and principles. Jarvis spoke up. I myself am currently residing in a machine, powered and functioning through the power of rune magic. While I started as a simple AI, the moment I started working with runes and their magic, I started becoming something more. As Harry explains it, magic and life go hand in hand. And so Jarvis is now a real boy. Harry said with a smile, please don't do that, Jarvis begged. What, he's got all the parts of a boy and everything. Harry smiled, you never did tell me if all your parts worked like they should, how about it? Do you want to tell me he started? I'm completely functional. Jarvis interrupted with an actual blush. Even the involuntary responses you had me program in. Jarvis looked sour for a minute. I still don't know why I need such indicators of emotional responses. Because they make you human. Harry said, does it embarrass you to talk about your body parts in front of a pretty girl? He teased. Jarvis did not respond, but his blush deepened. Wanda thought it was cute and patted him on his shoulder. Don't let him tease you. I like it. You're honest. They were all enjoying the drinks, discussing the actual weather and how Harry literally controlled it on the island when he had an idea. Oh, that would be a nice test, he said as he jumped up and ran to the house. Where is he going? Wanda asked. Not much gets him so excited that he forgets he can summon or make a portal. Natasha said as she looked at Jarvis. He nodded and they both said, broom cupboard. Together, what does he need brooms for? Could he not just clean with his magic? Wanda asked, confused. Harry's magic stops things from getting dirty in the first place. Loki said, observe. He summoned some sand into his hand and sprinkled it on the counter. The grains started rolling to the side as if the table was at an angle and the sand was simply following gravity. Harry doesn't mind cleaning up a spill but dislikes scratching up the bar with sand, so he arranged things this way. Natasha informed them. At that moment, Harry appeared next to the bar with 2 brooms. He held one out to Wanda and when she took it, Harry mounted his own and kicked off gently. That's not how you instructed me the first time. Loki said as he pulled his own prized broom from nowhere. He never did tell Harry how he did that, called it tricks of the trade and smiled but never revealed the trick. Harry scoffed, you could handle the fall, he countered. She's a human. If she falls wrong from just a couple of meters, she could die. He turned to her, want to give it a try, he asked. Wanda looked at the 2 men flying on brooms and grinned, not because it looked fun because it did, but because it looked ridiculous to her. It didn't stop her from putting the broom between her legs and wondering what to do. Lean slightly forward and kick off of the ground like a small jump. You should feel the broom begin to support you when you try to take off, Harry said. Wanda looked at him skeptically but lifted the broom up and tried jumping. She felt silly as the broom didn't shoot off with her like it had with them, but then she felt it just before her feet touched the ground. She was suddenly sitting quite comfortably on the shaft of the broom. She was about to ask how it was so comfortable but then realized the answer would be magic. Good, Harry smiled. He was inwardly whooping in glee. An actual human witch. Okay, so to go forward. Soon the 3 were flying around the island and Pietro had to ask Natasha for a refill, but before she could, an elf appeared behind the bar, having been waiting for his moment. The elves had been indoctrinated with the need to be helpful and Harry hoped it wasn't the start of the next race of house elves. He gave them all the necessities and encouraged them to ask for things. Fortunately, they didn't ever ask for more work as a reward for good work, like a certain house elf had. Pietro had taken a liking to the iced vodka and asked for another one with lime and lemonade. The elf, not having made this drink before, looked at Natasha, who pointed at the right knob for the requested sparkling lemonade, then asked for one herself, not having drunk it like that before. "It's really good," she said with a nod as she tasted it. "It's better than it normally is," Pietro said. "Is the vodka kept really cold or something?" "The vodka is magical," Natasha said. "It has a potion in it to keep you cool." "That is awesome." Pietro decided. "You should try the fire whiskey," the elf Eldrin suggested. "It is by far the favorite. It has an element of fire and has a calming effect." The elves, fortunately, were quite unused to alcohol and didn't need a lot to become intoxicated, so they tended to drink very little. It was a shame, as Harry had heard that some of their kind were renowned for making the best wine known to even Asgard. Wanda was the first to land. "I still say you cheated. My broom is limited, unlike yours." Loki just laughed. "You should not accept challenges to a race if you don't know what your broom can do." Wanda wouldn't admit defeat, so she had simply used her power to try and pull the others back, but had been unable to bend her power onto their brooms. "How are you immune to my power?" she asked bluntly. "You mean when you were trying to grab onto our brooms?" Harry asked. She glared but nodded. "Well, brooms are enchanted to resist outside forces, to prevent such tampering. You'd have had more luck if you tried to grab Loki by his head." He chuckled at Loki's scandalous look. Wanda looked at Pietro. "Do you want to give it a try?" she asked. She knew the chances of him being able to use it was small because she had asked about it but wanted to see for herself. Also, it might be funny. Pietro was at her side in a flash and took the broom. He had watched her and did as she had, but nothing happened. He knew he'd been had when she smiled at him. "That is not funny," he said as he removed the broom from between his legs. "Hold on," Harry said with his own smile. He passed his own broom to Wanda. "Be careful, remember not to go too far or you'll not be able to come back." He lifted his hands and touched Pietro for just a second while touching the broom. "There, you're bonded with the broom. Even non-magicals can use them that way." An hour later they were back and Pietro demanded to have a faster broom. It was not fair that he was slower than everyone in his opinion. Harry told him that he could always bond him to the one his sister had used, which was his own and Natasha's when she felt like it. Harry could fly without, after all. Pietro declined. He did enjoy the flight, but it would not be the same unless they were flying together. "Do you want to go for a fly?" Wanda asked Jarvis, who shook his head. "The magic does not communicate with my physiology the way it does with yours. Harry is still working on that." Jarvis replied, "Don't worry about it. When Harry takes us on the tour later, I'll take Charlie for a ride." "Charlie?" Wanda asked with a raised eyebrow. She walked to him and touched his arm, then her eyebrows rose. "Really?" she asked. "What did you see?" Harry asked. "Some kind of eagle-horse hybrid," Wanda said. Harry congratulated Jarvis. "Well done choosing what to show her. It's not unlike what I did at my previous job." Jarvis smirked, referring to taking control of televisions and projecting things for people to see. "I bet," Harry said. "If you don't want to wait, you could always ask Wanda to give you a lift on the broom." I'm not certain that's a good idea," Jarvis said before turning to Wanda. "No offense, but you did only learn to fly today." He was actually very interested in the idea, but the blush had brought with it the certainty that certain physiological responses might be triggered if he spent time in such close proximity to the young witch. He tended to connect with people for their minds, but something about Wanda and the way she could read his mind was very attractive to him. "I understand," Wanda said to Jarvis. She wasn't pouting, but she wasn't smiling either. "Tell me about the eagle horse," she asked him instead. "I have not met him personally, but I have heard all about Charlie and the other hippogriffs," Jarvis started. After that it was question upon question, and Jarvis tried to provide everything he knew, which was quite a lot, considering the time he spent listening to Bruce as he was figuring out the properties of magical ingredients. Pietro, meanwhile, had a bit of a far-off look in his eyes as he watched some of the nymphs playing in the pool. "Pietro?" Harry asked. He didn't respond. "Zira," he called into the group. There were a few too many for him to know where she is at all times like he had before. He saw a head snap up and swivel his way. When he spotted her, he pointed at Pietro. She saw and understood the look immediately, followed his eyes, and went to go speak to the frolicking girls. A minute later, Pietro seemed to come to himself. He turned around and spoke to the bartender again, having apparently been in the middle of a conversation. Harry decided to let it go in favor of watching the little ones playing in the shallow pool that he had added recently for children. He'd also had to expand on the big one around the bar, since there were so many people to accommodate these days. The fact that they were all beautiful bikini-clad women didn't bother Harry in the slightest. Zira had to take charge of the new additions when they had started openly flirting with Harry. They still needed time to adjust to feeling as alive as they did on the island. Logan didn't object to the attention when he came to deliver fertilizer for the nymph house. He'd actually taken quite the liking to Samantha too, and had started taking the younger nymphs because there were a few now to explore the island. He said it was to make certain that they didn't explore in the wrong places, but Harry secretly thought it was because they had adopted him as Uncle Logan. Harry was not aware of Logan taking anything further with the nymphs, but wouldn't mind either. He knew what he was doing, and everyone on the island respected him. As the island's chosen caretaker, it had come as a shock to him when the creatures now actively sought him out when they had problems or injuries. He didn't complain as it made his life easier. Puppy now also had a couple of young who had all lost their mother before they were ready to leave the nest. Logan had found them almost dead and starving. Puppy had jumped at the chance to raise them. Once they were healthy, they had started exploring under her strict supervision. So far, there had been no issues or need to step in. Logan's connection was now strong enough that he could tell she had been making sure that they knew how things worked on the island. Logan brought food. They were happy. Puppy had taken to flying around the island every now and then as a sort of sentinel, her highly accurate vision allowing her to spot the smallest movements on the ground. When there were issues, she'd either inform Logan through the link, or she'd show the creature where Logan was. By flying to him, the system worked reasonably well, and Logan hoped that the small ones would join her at some point and then learn what she was doing by example. As it was, they just waited at the entrance to her habitat when she left, still too young to fly. The twins had been shocked when Puppy came by on one of her normal patrols and blew out a gout of flame in greeting of the guests. "Is that a dragon?" Pietro asked incredulously. "Yes, and she's almost an adult too," Logan said as he stepped out of the foliage as he liked to do. "Just has a little more growing to do if the books are right. That thing's not fully grown yet," Wanda exclaimed. It was a very large creature, easily larger than an elephant. "Nah, she's still a kid," Logan said fondly. "She's getting there though. Did she tell you we were here?" Harry asked. "Yup," Logan confirmed. "I decided to come see the new faces and maybe the girls for a bit," he said, looking at where the young nymphs and elves were splashing in the kiddie pool. It seemed that Samantha had started coming out of her shell, and while she was still shy, the other kids were encouraging and tended to follow her around as she knew the island best. She actually started speaking, even if she said very little. Logan walked to the bar and tapped the countertop. The bar elf handed him a beer almost immediately, and Logan sat back to watch the girls play as he spoke. "The little ones have been spreading their wings lately. I'm thinking they are getting impatient to join Puppy in her patrols." "Puppy?" Wanda asked. Logan pointed at Puppy's warm spring where he had heard her enter shortly after arriving. "The babies could take care of themselves for a bit. Puppy's my dragon. She's the gentle sort, but only as long as you respect the island and its inhabitants." "She's still stewing about the elves?" Harry asked with a smile. "They should have known better," Logan grumbled. "Running off a unicorn because they were getting curious. Unicorns don't bother anyone. Why would you scare one? It'll take months before that mare steps anywhere near where her favorite grazing spot was." "I do apologize, Master Logan," the elf behind the bar said. "When faced with a creature with a very sharp horn, some of our people react badly. We could not have known that they were the unicorns of legend." "You should have asked then," Logan grumbled. "We could have taken them on a tour faster than we did," Harry said. "Let's just be glad they didn't attack the creature. If she was injured in the slightest, there probably wouldn't be an elf community on the island anymore. I don't think Prongs would be that forgiving." Logan grunted in agreement. "Have you seen him yet?" Logan asked. Harry shook his head. "No, but I can feel he's around. My magic won't pinpoint him for me, but I suspect he'll come to me if there's ever a need." "Who's Prongs?" Jarvis asked. "Didn't we tell you?" Harry asked. When Jarvis shook his head, Harry got a sad look. "That's probably my fault. I was quite upset at missing the big event." Harry got a look and asked, "Did you ever get the pensive tablet to work with the new features?" Jarvis perked up. "Oh yes, I forgot to tell you." Then he got a look himself. "I never used to forget things. Happens to the best of us, only human," Logan said easily. Harry noted that he twitched when one of the kids slipped and fell. But when they came up laughing, he relaxed. Logan was such a softie when it came to children. Jarvis smiled softly at that. "Thank you, Master Logan." Then he turned to Harry. "And yes, I was able to get the prototype finished just a couple of days ago." "Where is it?" Harry asked excitedly. Jarvis sighed and got up. "It's in my lab," he said. After much deliberation, Harry had set up a small rune lab connected to Jarvis' own office remotely. On Harry's hidden floor, Harry turned a portal for Jarvis, who knew his employer would not want to wait. "I'll be right back." He excused himself and stepped through. "Is that a kind of magic I can learn?" Wanda asked. "It seems very useful." "Maybe one day," Harry said. "I learned this one after using my magic to monitor and test the effects of an event that happens only once every 5,000 years. He explained. "If I feel you are at a point where you can do the same, I'll have you monitor my portal and see if you can figure it out. But don't be disappointed if you can't." Loki interjected. I've been a magic user for longer than Harry's been alive, but even I cannot figure it out. He looked at Harry and he won't tell even me, his doting older brother. Tell me how you have anything you want within reach at all times, Harry countered. That's not the same, Loki defended. Oh, really? Harry said as he opened a portal and took Loki's glass away from him from where he was sitting. It's not like I don't have my own ways of doing exactly the same thing. But how do I do mine? Loki smirked. Oh, come on, Harry said. He wasn't really that interested since he literally could do something similar, but it had turned into something of a game between them. They had many games now that Harry thought about it. Just for the fun of it, he opened a portal beneath Loki's chair and sent him falling into the pool. Very useful, Wanda repeated. Jarvis came back through the portal. Sorry for the wait, I had to quickly forward a mail on to my boss, he said with a smile. Who's it from? Harry asked as he watched Loki climb out of the pool and knocked him back in with a flick of his finger and a smirk on his face. He laughed when Loki yelped before splashing back in. A certain Miss Susan Storm. Apparently there's a problem of some sort with a device they built that's supposed to go to something called the negative zone. Jarvis informed him. What? Harry exclaimed as he jumped up to open a portal quickly. Wait, Jarvis interrupted. They have a mirror. If it was an emergency, you'd have gotten a call. He reminded Harry. Harry stopped mid-action and looked at Jarvis. Next time just tell me who it's from. He sighed. Loki, having made it to the bar this time, had heard the whole thing even though he was wading his way out of the water and between frolicking and giggling nymphs to make it out. He was impressed with Jarvis. He could tell the AI had meant for Harry's reaction. Maybe they could team up against him at some point. Harry glared at Jarvis a bit longer before taking out his phone and looking for the mail. When he found it, he quickly read through it and then sighed. Their first test was a success, but then they had a breach and had to forcibly shut it down. Apparently the shield I helped put up blocked something trying to get through, and they want me there for the next test. When? Natasha asked. Tomorrow, Harry said. I'm not bothered. I'll go to the test and then I can bring the team to the island for a visit afterward. I'd like to show them the new feature. He finished with a wink. New feature? Loki asked. New feature. Harry confirmed. He lifted a hand and clicked his fingers, activating the room's programmed feature as a tube started forming around the bar, making lazy circles overhead and impossible loops, where one could see the water running through the half-pipe where it was completely upside down. You made a water slide? Natasha asked. It started as an idea for the kids, but then I wanted to try it too and it kind of went from there. Harry confirmed. Then he took off, levitating Natasha with him, to where the stairs had materialized and rose up the many floors to the top, where he landed with her, only to find Pietro already jumping into the pipe, fully clothed. Bastard. I wanted to let Natasha have the first go, he screamed after him. Before he disappeared around the first corner, Pietro turned and smirked back. You should have seen it coming, wizard. Harry looked after him incredulously and lifted a hand only for Natasha to catch it. Don't, he's just having fun. Harry grumbled good-naturedly and decided to let it go, but next time he'd open a portal and have Pietro stuck going through the whole thing over and over for an hour. Natasha shrugged off her top and sarong, which she had gone to put on earlier, grabbed him and kissed him passionately before jumping into the pipe. Which, he called after her before smirking and transfiguring his clothes and jumping in after her. The experience was quite magical as the water seemed to flow upward on more than one occasion and the ride took more than 2 minutes to complete. You had to love magic, when a small straight could be turned into a long slide that culminated in multiple loops. Before you carry on with the twisting, turning ride. When they reached the bottom, which ended in the circular pool, Harry looked around for Pietro, only to hear him cheering up above him, having apparently entered the tube again. Harry just smiled and laughed to himself as he flew out of the pool and hovered above where Natasha was floating in the water and looking up at the slide, trying to track Pietro's progress. He kissed her and then went back to the bar, with her attached to him as she had grabbed onto his shoulders. They landed and Harry looked up to note the steady line of nymphs all making their way up the stairs after Logan of all people, who was most likely going to instruct them on water slide etiquette. Harry saw the first people behind him were the kids, which made him smirk again. Such a softie. The ride turned out to be a huge success and Harry promised to himself that he'd leave it there for the others to enjoy. Not long after the water slide appeared, the elves had started turning up and the pool area was soon inundated by magical creatures and people, just hanging around and enjoying the atmosphere as the music played in the bar, and they watched as people were ejected from the slide with smiling faces and more interesting positions, some coming out sideways and some sitting with their backs to the water. The spectacle of the exit positions kept everyone entertained, and there was a lot of laughter and merriment all around. The bartender needed Loki's help to keep up with the requests for drinks, and he was more than happy to comply. Something about the act of serving drinks to grateful people had struck a note with him, and he understood why Harry enjoyed the pastime so much. Why he guarded his territory so jealously. He suspected the elf understood as well. Because he had showed up the moment he could help. Harry was not surprised when Tony and Pepper soon joined them. He'd heard they were going to the island and were introducing the twins to the locals. Harry seemed to have gained the Asgardian ability to turn any occasion into a party. Bruce and Sif soon followed, then Clint and Laura with the kids, who soon found their friends among the elf and nymph kids. Harry suspected Tony had spread the word when Steve showed up and joined Logan at the top of the water slide to keep him company. When Harry saw the amount of people turning up, he decided to make a quick run to go fetch some more. Pretty soon the residents of the X-Mansion had walked through the portal. Xavier wasn't too happy when Harry had walked into the class and summarily dismissed the kids and told them to get ready for a bit of fun and a barbecue on the island in 10 minutes. The other staff had simply laughed and encouraged the kids to get ready quickly, to help their fellows, and to ensure nobody was left behind. When Harry appeared at the Baxter building, he greeted Roberta, the robotic/holographic AI receptionist, and walked in, hoping he wouldn't find anything strange happening. Fortunately, Reed was busy compiling data and apparently fine-tuning the control equipment to what seemed like a gateway of some sort, which had a sealed space vehicle of some sort in front of it. Harry snuck up behind Reed invisibly, to try and scare him, and just as he was about to make a noise, Reed said, "If you were planning on scaring me, you really shouldn't greet Roberta. It's literally her job to announce visitors." Harry pouted as he became visible. "She wasn't supposed to tell you." He complained. Reed still hadn't looked up and answered as he worked on the inside of the control panel, his arm having stretched to get at a difficult screw from a different angle. "And last time, when you asked her not to, she didn't. I had to give her strict orders to ignore your orders to ignore mine. So if I told her to ignore your strict order to ignore my order to ignore yours, would she do it again?" Harry asked with a smile. "Please stop that," Ben asked from the couch. He was in his human form, reading through what seemed to be an instruction manual on the craft currently in the middle of the lab. "I get a headache when Reed starts talking his science stuff as it is." "But you're a bloody astronaut," Harry objected. "Yeah, but I'm not a bloody astrophysicist. Nor am I a genius. I got my qualifications the old-fashioned way by working for it." Ben had given up on the manual and got up to greet Harry properly. "Hey Harry, it's good to see you," he said with a genuine smile as he shook his hand. "It's good to see you too, Ben," Harry said. "How's that girl of yours doing?" Ben smiled and said, "She's doing a lot better than she did when you surprised her with those reading glasses." "Hey, I didn't think she'd pass out from sensation overload. I didn't even know that something like that existed." Harry defended himself. "I thought she'd appreciate being able to see again." "Sensory overload," Reed corrected. "Oh, she's more than happy, don't get me wrong, just warn a girl before you do strange things to her," Sue said as she entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee, one for herself and the other obviously for Ben since it was huge. "Thanks, Sue," Ben said as he took the large cup from her with ease in one hand. She had had to use her force field to help her carry the cup, but for Ben, it wasn't even an effort. Harry had been able to change the outward appearance of his physical body. But inside, he was still the large rock man that needed more food for sustenance. Fortunately, a permanent weight effect on the amulet allowed him to use an elevator again and not crush a couch when he sat down on it. It also allowed him to jump great distances, much like Hulk. Those two had gotten along like a house on fire when they first met. It was while Ben in his rock form had gone to Harry's lab for the first time to try the first iteration of the amulet. As he waited for one of the adjustments, Hulk had asked to meet the big man and Bruce had agreed. The rest is history. Now when Hulk feels cooped up, he's got a buddy to go smashing/clobbering with him in the room. "Hi, Sue," Harry said with a smile and a friendly wave. She ignored him. "Still mad that you can't sneak up on me?" Harry asked with a smirk. She still didn't say anything. "If it makes you feel any better, you could probably still explode my heart with just a thought." "Not that I hope you try that anytime soon." When she still refused to answer him, Harry shrugged. "Okay, fine, be that way." He turned to the other two. "Reed, Ben, I'm having a party on the island and you are both invited. If you happen to know any girls you want to invite, I'd be happy to bring them if they are capable of acknowledging my existence, because there are more than 100 beautiful magical women on the island, all in bathing suits, and they are likely to be interested in having long, meaningful conversations with my friends." "When?" Ben asked. "Right now." It was kind of spur of the moment. Harry apologized. "I understand if you're not interested." "I'm in," Johnny said as he walked in from where he had been listening in from outside the room. "Hi, Johnny," Harry said. "Are you sure you can handle all those girls? Once you start something with a nymph, you'd best be prepared to finish it, and they tend to keep men for months to years depending on their prowess." They'll be done with him in minutes, I'm sure, Ben said with a smile. Have you seen what I look like? Johnny asked incredulously with a hint of humor. You look like a model, Ben started with a nod. When Johnny smiled, Ben continued, for an STD infomercial. Johnny soured. He'd love to insult Ben about needing to date a blind girl, but Harry took that away from him. Ben's confidence had actually grown since Harry helped him, considering his physical strength. Combined with the durability and other gifts afforded to him by his natural form, he was kind of the lucky one. At least I don't have to rely on magic to fit into normal society. I've seen the girls you hang out with. You're the one that wouldn't fit in with normal society. Ben argued. The smile didn't leave his face. Johnny had not been able to use him as a verbal punching bag since Harry showed up. He still felt he owed the man a proper reward. If only for that. So, are we leaving those two behind? Harry asked Reed, pointing at the arguing pair. Reed had finally finished what he was doing and straightened out from his strange position. That does sound like sound advice, until I remember that means we'd come home to a destroyed building. If you two can't behave yourselves, I couldn't in good conscience take you with us. I wouldn't want to expose my people to you and let them think that that's normal behavior for our world, especially while many of them are still learning our customs, Harry said before he turned seriously to Johnny. Also, the majority of the people on my island were freed from a life of slavery in the last couple of months. If you so much as give the impression of impropriety, I'll make it so that you have to sit down to pee for a month. Do you understand me? He said it calmly with a smile on his face. Johnny actually gulped. Yes, sir, he said. At least he'd get to watch. Sue was impressed despite herself. Johnny hadn't listened to anyone seriously in a long time. He tended to just smile and charm his way past obstacles and do whatever he wanted anyway. She nodded and turned to go get some things. Harry smirked and subtly cast a couple of privacy charms as Ben called Alicia to find out if she was available. She responded positively, and Harry quickly got some info from Ben to go through a portal and pick her up. She was able to send a photo and describe her location well enough for Harry to get the portal set in the correct place. They greeted each other and then they were just waiting for Sue. She soon returned and looked around, not spotting them. Harry, are you hiding us from her? Reed asked. Why would you think that? Harry asked, shrugging his shoulders and undoing the magic. Maybe it's an extension of her illness. You know, the one that makes her not notice me. Sue had noticed them the moment the magic was dropped. She knew Harry was having fun showing her how he could hide them better than she could hide herself from him. Okay, that's enough, she said. If I promise to stop giving you the silent treatment, will you at least give me a straight answer? How did you know I was there? Because I know you couldn't see me. Harry huffed but nodded. As long as you can apologize for accusing me of cheating when I tell you. Sue didn't look happy but nodded and held out her hand to him, which he shook. Harry smiled. The emergency port keys you all wear, he started. When she nodded, he continued. They use my magic, I can feel them. So you did cheat, Sue accused. Harry just shook his head in resignation. I don't call it cheating when you use your gifts to try and sneak up on me, just like you shouldn't when I use mine to detect you. He did not wait for a response before he opened another portal and stepped through. With the amount of people frequenting the resort these days, they had set a designated arrival location just off the bar area which people avoided naturally because of the limited wards on it. It was no more than a compulsion, but good enough to keep the people safe. Once the Fantastic Four were through, Harry decided to make one more call, so he opened the portal one last time. Hey guys, he said as he walked through, how are things going here? Harry, Rocket exclaimed. Perfect timing, mind sending a bolt of something extra magical at the ship following us. It's been trying to take us down for hours now. I think it's run out of heavy munitions and ballistics, but they are still firing on us constantly using energy weapons. Harry didn't look worried as he sat down on a conjured recliner with an equally conjured drink. And what did you do to deserve being attacked by them? Our magical friend is right to be suspicious. We have a habit of committing crimes and getting into fights because of it, Drax said with a smile as he got up out of his chair to greet Harry. We stole from a dead person, Mantis said excitedly from her seat. Technically, he was alive when we got there, but he ended up walking in front of stray weapons fire. Rocket said, whose weapon? Harry asked. Who knows, everyone was shooting at that point. Probably had something to do with us listening in on Kree-encrypted communications for Brand and Nova Prime. They don't like that kind of thing. Rocket said, and the stealing part? Harry asked. Well, the guy's jump ship was just sitting there after we killed him, and I thought to myself, who do I know who has a real love of looking into advanced technology and who needs a long-range scanner system for their planet? Rocket looked at Harry. Do you know who popped into my head? Harry couldn't help but smile. "You are incorrigible, Rocket." He got up and cast his modified bubblehead charm outside where he could see and directed Rocket to go around it and lead the enemy ship through it. As planned, the enemy ship couldn't detect the pocket of air, and even though the air didn't do much if your ship wasn't running on runes or specifically protected, the magic still wreaked havoc on your more sensitive systems. The enemy ship stopped chasing them and just continued to float in the last direction it was going. "Does that ship look dead to you?" Rocket asked. "We did just kill most of their systems with magic, Rocket," Harry said. He looked around and asked, "Where's Quill and Gamora anyway?" He had seen Groot on a seat, but he hadn't been interested and was playing some kind of handheld game. "Hi, Groot. I am Groot," Groot said. It sounded like whatever to Harry. "Yeah, about Quill and Gamora," Rocket said, pointing at the floating ship. "What are the chances that we killed any really important life-sustaining systems on that ship?" Harry asked urgently. "The chances that life support systems are down is 100%, but that should still give them a couple of hours of air," Rocket assured Harry. At that moment there seemed to be an explosion as a part of the ship was blown away and the air started escaping. "They probably still have internal shields as long as the power is on," Rocket tried lamely, just as the last external light they could see went off. That might be a problem. Just as Harry was about to cover the entire ship in a bubble of air, he felt something and relaxed. There was the sound of a crash from further inside the ship and Peter's voice yelled out, "Damn it, Rocket, I told you not to leave your stuff in our landing point." Gamora's voice also spoke up, "I landed fine." Harry just smirked. These Guardians were a random bunch but so much fun. He took out a mirror and called for Brand. "Yes," she answered. "Hi. I'm about to open a portal in Delivery Point Alpha. We've got some friends coming for a visit and they have gifts," Harry said before closing the connection. He opened a portal and used his magic to direct the enemy ship through. Then he told Rocket to have them follow it. "Where are we parking?" Rocket asked as he directed them through. These portals of Harry's was amazing. It would have taken them days to get that far even when using jump points. "Just hang tight," Harry said. He had a smile on his face as Peter and Gamora walked onto the bridge. Gamora looked fine, but Peter had a couple of bruises, a split lip and a cut above his eye. "You look like you had a fun time." "Harry," Peter asked before a smile appeared on his bruised face, "it's damn good to see you. Did you do that?" he asked, pointing at the broken ship. "I am Groot," Groot said, "needing someone to save you again." "I don't always need someone to save me," Peter objected. Groot actually looked up from the game and just looked at Peter. "You are the reason I was captured," Gamora objected. "Next time I'll just leave you to try your luck in a Kree interrogation cell." "I said I was sorry," Peter said with his hands in the air. "You could still change your mind," Nebula said as she walked in from the rear of the ship where she had been sleeping in her bunk. She had faith in her sister and didn't really care about Peter. "The tree will probably mature in another couple of years," she joked. Harry wasn't aware that she had decided to stay with them, but considering what they were doing and who for, it wasn't a big leap to understand why. "I am Groot," Groot exclaimed. "No thanks." Gamora just glared at the tree creature, who seemed to divert his attention to the game to avoid eye contact, and she let it go. Turning back to Harry, she said, "Thanks for the help." Then she walked to her seat and sat down. She didn't do thank you very often. Harry's intervention had interrupted the interrogation of the man she reluctantly cared for. She was then able to break both of them free, grab their gear and activate the emergency port key, which was connected to her favorite dagger. She didn't go anywhere without it. "Guardians," said a voice over the communication systems, while a giant holographic screen appeared outside the ship's main windows, with the face of Bran looking at them like they were insects. "You're supposed to be keeping tabs on the Kree for the next week to get us information on their movements. We got word of something important and needed to get out. They spotted us and Harry showed up to help." Peter spoke up before Rocket could. Rocket loved to act like the captain of the ship. "Fine, we're lighting the way for you. Leave the broken ship where it is. We'll get our people to retrieve it." "Anything to declare?" Brand asked with the tiniest of upturns of her lip. "Lots of dead Kree," Gamora said with a happy smile. "We also picked up a jump ship with a good long-range sensor array," Rocket added. "Good work," Brand said before the holographic image disappeared and a new one appeared. That of a three-dimensional rectangular tunnel made out of flashing lights with red at the top and green on the bottom to show which orientation to approach the docking bay. The galactic standard, according to the Nova Corps. Rocket took them in and they entered a large door that appeared before them in the middle of nothing. "Good cloaking tech," Peter said. "Magic," Harry responded. "Yeah, I realized," Rocket said with a smile. "That hologram is magic-based?" he asked as they stopped inside the first door where recompression would take place before they would be allowed into the bay where gravity was active. "Yup," Harry said proudly. It was technically one of Jarvis' additions, but he was still proud of his friend. Just added it a couple of weeks ago. Devious. Rocket approved. Anybody decides to fly through the hologram and they kill their own systems due to magical overload. It does serve as a nice first line of defense. Harry agreed. Jarvis says you're busy with your first mastery project. Only planning at this point. Rocket answered with a grin. I still need to set up a place where I can experiment somewhere outside the nearest couple of galaxies just in case I blow the nearest one up. The thought made Harry queasy. A short couple of years ago, he wouldn't have understood the implications of such a statement. But now it was something he could understand to fear. Blow up? He asked incredulously. Well, when you try to weaponize the gravitational forces of supermassive black holes and the singularities that make them up, you start to tread where nobody ever should. Rocket said as he smirked at Harry. Don't worry, Harry, I know the rules. I'll make sure that both the location of my tests and the supermassive black hole I'm tampering with aren't anywhere near each other or any living thing. Harry was still feeling kind of sick at the idea. Please have someone check your information first. It sounds like you're messing with universally destructive forces here. I am. It's going to be amazing. Rocket said with a look of wonder in his eyes. But it'll probably take most of my life to just get the math right for what I want to do, so don't worry. Harry sighed in relief. Thank science, he said, much as Tony once had. He'd have to see what Tony thought of the idea and maybe help dissuade Rocket from his plans. Teaching him runes may have been a mistake. He didn't know that Rocket was just messing with him. He couldn't see any way to mess with a normal black hole from a collapsed star, let alone a supermassive black hole which kept entire galaxies spinning around them. Once they had landed, Harry opened a portal and told them to contact him once their debriefing was done. He'd open a portal and they could join the party if they were interested. When he turned around again, Groot, Drax and Nebula had already walked through, with Mantis standing there and wondering if she should stay or go. Harry smiled and shook his head before he indicated for her to go through. Peter caught a glimpse of the pool party going on through it and wanted to join Harry immediately, but Gamora caught his arm and held him back. Harry smirked at him before stepping through and closing the portal behind him. The first thing he saw was Groot being manhandled by an excited Samantha who had come to take him to meet her new friends. He seemed to be only slightly annoyed, but he was soon smiling sincerely for the first time since Harry had stepped onto their ship. Harry hoped he kept his bad attitude in check around the kids. Don't fear, Groot has very gentle feelings toward the tree people and especially his Samantha. Mantis said. Harry asked with bit of worry as he looked over to the girl. He has found a kinship in her and he often speaks of her fondly. He believes he is the last of his kind and they are the closest he could ever have to a real family, someone that can understand him. Mantis explained. What about Rocket? Harry asked. Rocket is like his overprotective father for the moment. Mantis said it will get better. Groot just needs a bit more time to grow up. Harry nodded along. Maybe he should spend a bit more time with the nymphs then, he suggested. I'll talk to Rocket about it. Maybe they will be off mission for a bit and Groot can stay here. Wise as always. Odin's voice boomed from behind Harry, who jumped at the sound. Then Harry smiled and hugged the man. It's really good to see you, he said, looking around to spot the rest of his family scattered around and chatting to the rest of Harry's friends and people. Who told you about the party? We were already aware that a lot of people were converging thanks to Heimdall, but when Sif reported that you had gone to go fetch more heroes that we had not yet met, we decided to come visit. Odin said with a smile. Between you and me, Frigga wanted to come see how the nymphs were doing. I think she's still hoping you'll slip up and start producing heirs for your kingdom. He chuckled. I think most of the people on the island are hoping for that. Harry confided. Then he turned and started introducing Odin to the Guardians that were in attendance, followed by the Fantastic Four. Xavier had a lot to discuss with Mantis and they were soon found sitting at one of the tables, which Harry had conjured when people started needing places to sit other than the ground. They were just staring into each other's eyes as they communicated telepathically. Xavier had yet to meet so powerful an empath, and she had never met so powerful a telepath. He actually confirmed that she had a small gift along those lines as well, but not strong enough to use on most complicated life forms. It did explain how quickly she was able to pick up on Groot's speech though. Astral projection was something she could work on and probably achieve, but he warned her to be careful and not practice something that leaves your body vulnerable when she was alone. Harry was soon making food for everyone, including vegetarian for the elves, who had at first declined, until Harry's superior cooking won them over when he introduced them to vegan alternatives which he had researched and procured for them. Tofu steak was a big winner with them. as was coconut cheese. Harry wasn't too fond of it, but any cheese was better than none. Once evening set and the party started winding down and the elves started making their way back to their village, the nymphs didn't last much longer. So when they left after a long procession for them to hug Harry again, they left as well. Seriously, Wanda asked, how do you not get jealous? Natasha smiled sadly. The nymphs all have a connection to the land and the land is connected to Harry. They can't help it. If I got jealous, it would be directed at someone as guilty as you are just for breathing. The land of our Harry as much as Asgard is. Frigga said, power flows to and from it with Harry at its epicenter. Much as Asgard is connected to its king, so is New Atlantis connected to Harry. There is also the fact that New Atlantis recently became the recipient of a spirit of its own. Odin said, it was a marvelous thing to behold the birth of a living island. Many legends will start here. The island is alive? Wanda asked. She felt like a parrot most of that day with her repeating things back at people for clarification. Indeed. Odin confirmed, I was there. Logan said from where he sat at the edge of the circle around the fire pit where he was sipping on his fire whiskey. It was something special, he said with a far-off look. Around the fire pit was arranged the rest of the heroes who had all showed up. All the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Asgardian royal family, and even Director Fury, Branch Director Hand, Director Brand, Coulson and his team, Jarvis, Wanda and Pietro. Those with partners had brought them along as well. Clint's kids had been taken to the guest house, which would see some use that evening with most of the people staying the night. Harry was still upset to having missed the event, but he reminded himself that he could not be in the center of everything that went on. That didn't mean he wouldn't have liked to have been there to feel the magic as it happened. A lot of what happened that night was still a mystery to him. He was about to change the subject as he returned from greeting the nymphs when something unexpected happened. As Harry sat down, there was a breeze and something stirred in the very ground beneath his feet. A feeling ran over him that he didn't immediately recognize, and Natasha had stiffened next to him. Harry, what's going on? She asked softly. I don't know, Harry said as he let his magic roll off of him to feel what was going on. When he felt his magic touch on it, he immediately withdrew his magic, accidentally snuffing the fire as the magic flew back into him. The darkness did not last long, as a faint glow drew everyone's attention. Be very still and do not interfere, Odin warned softly, but in a voice that carried so that everyone heard and understood. From behind a tree the glow revealed the glowing figure of Prongs as he stepped out of the tree line and started walking to them slowly. Harry watched with awe, as for the first time he saw the spirit of his island after it merged with New Atlantis. It walked up to Harry and performed a bow with one hoof lifted up, before it went on to smell and acknowledge all of the people seated around the fire pit. When it came to Groot, it actually head-butted him softly and Groot seemed to glow for a second, before he sat down and stared open-mouthed at Prongs. I am Groot, he said softly. Thank you. The stag continued its circle until it came to the twins. It sniffed at Pietro and nodded before going to his sister. It sniffed her and then straightened, suddenly a look of alarm on its features. It looked at Harry and communicated something non-verbally, which Harry only barely understood, before it lowered its antlers and rushed at her suddenly. Harry was suddenly by her side, holding her in place. What are you doing? Both her and her brother demanded as the deer ran right through her. She immediately collapsed onto the ground and Harry ran his magic through her to feel what was going on. The deer had somehow communicated that there was something wrong with her magic and that it would attempt to cleanse her. Harry had heard of and seen dark magic, but that was usually because the user of the magic was dark, not the magic itself. What he felt now shocked him. Actual dark magic, like the kind he'd only ever experienced in demonic creatures like Dementors, the magic itself clung to her and tried to return to her to affect her. It was strange too, like the opposite of Harry's magic. Where his magic was straightforward and wanted to be used like a tap under pressure, this magic was greedy and wanted to multiply and become more. He felt a randomness about it, a kind of indirectness. Driven but not directed. The deer, having done what it came to do, trotted off as Harry started flooding her system with his own magic, much as Loki had shown him he could do to get rid of foreign magic. The dark magic fought him and tried to infect him. But Harry had a secret weapon. He lifted his hand and started summoning Patroni. He channeled the magic directly from his ring and kept on summoning the light creatures. Tony was telling Pepper what he was seeing through his special glasses, which he had put on the moment Harry lifted his hand, and nothing seemed to be happening except for the looks of amazement from the powered in attendance. Harry directed the 20 Patroni to run through her over and over again in a straight line before running in a circle and doing it again. Pietro had a look on his face like he was watching his sister die, but Loki had locked him in place. When he realized the man would attack Harry if he thought he was doing something nefarious, not on his watch, the Patroni kept on going through her over and over again, and slowly Harry could feel the dark magic give way. Slowly its hooks that had been dug in so deep started to let go. All the while Harry was filling her with his own magic, so that the dark magic had no place to go, even if the Patroni stopped what they were doing, which he would not allow. Minutes passed and Tony had given in, and everyone that didn't have the ability had had a look to see what was happening. Unfortunately, the dark magic wasn't visible to them, so they just had to believe that Harry knew what he was doing, and they had all the faith they needed. Ben had stepped up to hold on to Pietro when he kept on struggling with Loki's hold. Loki was grateful because the more desperate Pietro became, the faster and harder he seemed to move. But Ben was immovable, even in his human form. When Harry felt the dark magic release its hold, he directed the Patroni, who had become the de facto host for the malicious energy, to stand in one location. He quickly summoned the hardiest container he owned to contain magic, which just so happened to be an MSC shell from before they started using the enchantment factory. He directed the Patroni into the shell and watched as they entered the magical container. Then he sealed it and sighed in relief, feeling the magic roiling but contained. Then he returned to Wanda. He checked her vitals and found that she was only sleeping. He stood back and cast an enervate at her. She instantly shot up. "It hurts," she screamed. "She has absorbed too much of your power, Harry." Odin said she must release it or it could destroy her. Harry caught on quickly and created a target, much like he used to do for Hulk. "Wanda, I need you to use the power and destroy the target. You know how to do this. Just focus your will," and Harry went silent as the target was vaporized, but Wanda was still brimming with energy. "Good, next," he said as he started conjuring more and more targets, all quite a ways up, just in case there was an unexpected piece of debris. Fortunately, it was all within the area Harry had set up for the fireworks, so the creatures on the island weren't disturbed. 5 minutes later, and a couple hundred targets destroyed. Wanda finally relaxed as her overloaded stores became bearable again. "What was that?" she asked between breaths. Odin, who had gone to inspect the container, spoke up. "Chaos magic." Loki sucked in a breath. "It cannot be. He was banished. He is an elder. There is no killing him." Odin disagreed. "He will always try to find a way back." "Who are you talking about?" Pietro asked after checking on his sister. "What just happened?" "It seems your sister had become host to a very dark influence, and the spirit of New Atlantis wanted to save her from a very horrible fate." A new voice said. Harry and Natasha recognized it instantly. "Ancient One?" Harry asked, remembering at the last second not to call her Yao. "Didn't think I'd ever use that portkey, did you?" Yao asked with a smile. "What are you doing here now?" Harry asked. "My job," Yao said honestly. "I'm here for the container," she said, pointing to Shell. Harry looked at it and saw that it was slowly darkening. Her hands flashed through a few movements and then held her hand up, palm forward, as green mandala formed around her forearm, and the darkening stopped completely. "Do you have a safe place to store it?" Harry asked. "No," Yao said easily. "I was simply going to send it to a more deserving recipient in one of the darker dimensions which we have complete protection from." Harry shrugged. "As long as we don't have to worry about it coming back to bite us in the ass. Your island's protections will be good enough, even if this seed somehow finds its way back to this dimension, which it won't, I can promise you that," she assured as she walked up to the shell, her arm still shining with green light as she picked it up before she bowed and said, "It was nice to see you all together. Have a good evening." Then she activated her portkey again and was gone. "Can someone please tell me what the hell is going on?" Fury demanded. "He so disliked it when people forgot that he was there." "Fear not, Director Fury," Odin said. "It seems that one of Harry's hidden allies has decided to show herself, that is all. As for the vessel she decided to take the liberty to dispose of, it was a connection to an ancient evil which I do not name for fear of drawing his attention. Suffice it to say the danger is past and you need not mobilize the troops." "What does it mean though?" Frigga asked. "If the old ones are moving. We have entered a time of change and we need to be prepared for it," Odin said.